So, Galactic Heroes, for those of you who don't know, is a 10-book novel series written in like the late 70s and early 80s, and also a 110-episode anime OVA, which is an original video animation for you Baka Gaijin.
Thank you.
It comes over 20 years. It is legitimately quite complex with many themes, but the three main themes or four, I guess, that you'll be experiencing here are whether corrupt democracy is better than a virtuous autocracy, that there's basically no such thing as honor, and it's cringe. There is no such thing as a perfect system of government, and perhaps the perfect system is the best that we can do right now, and that good pussy really breaks a motherfucker. It's more of like a fictional, historical epic than anything else. It's, more importantly, like a historiography of the story itself at the same time, especially in the novels, where like they do like the Dune thing, where like they like foreshadow like all of the future events of the story by like having like future historians like writing about it, and like
it auto spoils.
Yeah, it like auto spoils, or like it'll be like, you know, like von Royenthal learned that this would be a prophetic message and very shortly or something, because like stuff like that, you know, like, and they have like little asides where they'll talk about like future historians are debate whether, you know, the intent of this statement, you know, and like they'll spend like 2 pages talking about that, which is kind of cool. I get a feeling that it's a lot like a space Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Because there are 3 kingdoms. There are a shitload of side characters, none of which I'll be talking about for brevity's sake. Like, we're talking like at least 100 or more.
Can you at least point out the ones with stupid names?
Yeah, well, there's one that's like Schlazlan Rockschlatter or something like that.
Is he from the Space Jew faction?
Yes, and he has 3 Z's in the name, which I'm not correctly.
Pheasant.
Yeah, Fazani. And I would say that its brilliancy is that more than anything else I've consumed, it managed to have like lots of legitimately profound dialogue about like government philosophy, war, society, without like feeling that the author is like, here is the time where I soapbox about politics, right? You know, it really naturally flows into the conversations and like dialogues about them better than anything else I've read. And you never really get the feeling that the author is like Bible thumping, like you do with a lot of other like thought-provoking sort of series. So the author, his name is Dr. Tanaka. He's made a couple other series you may or may not have heard of, including The Heroic Legend of Arslan, which is based on the Persian epic Amir Arsalan. He made a satire of Chinese mythology called The Legend of the Dragon Kings. He has a PhD in comparative literature and mythology, and it really shows. And he's a huge Sinobu. He's translated like 2 Chinese historical biographies and the biography of General Yue Fei, apparently.
Is he Japanese?
He is Japanese. The author is Japanese. But he is
Tanaka, you figure.
Yeah, he is a Sinobu. I did read that on Wikipedia that Galactic Heroes is like... Okay. Galactic Heroes is very, very important in online Chinese internet space literature, which is a big subgenre, apparently. Enough that there are like multiple academic articles written about the Galactic Heroes' influence on the genre. So I'm going to have to wait for Kim about this. The rest of it, now I'm getting to the important stuff.
What's that genre called again?
The Chinese thing?
Yeah.
I mean, it just says... I wrote Chinese internet space literature, or sci-fi literature. Basically.
Yeah, Chinese sci-fi. It doesn't really have it. I think they literally say sci-fi in Chinese. I read like I tried to do I did a talk actually at one of these about Chinese like martial arts literature, and that came up in researching that.
So you may notice at this timeline how all like 3/4 of the timeline span maybe 5 years. And then there are literally like 5,000 years of history before anything that the story actually, happens in the present tense. But they're all important to the event.
The era when nothing important.
Yeah, except it did, unfortunately. But before that, I'm going to explain the 3 main powers. So the first, and this is like for the present day is here, 3596 Common Era. So at this point there is the Empire, which is like space Prussia, basically. It's pretty much everyone is white, and they, even though they're not like, they're very clearly not all Germanic, but they like LARP Germanic, and like took on like really stupid and ostentatious like German names and stuff, and it's a lot of like, like honor and like warlike militarism, like very Prussian kind of society, and the aesthetics of it are based on it quite heavily too. If you can't tell, that's like the Prussian, military regalia.
Yeah.
The imperial one.
Just sprinkle a couple of funds in your name.
Yeah, basically. There's and then there's the Alliance, which is like, they were created by a bunch of, like, essentially, I guess you could call them like refugees, but they just, basically a whole bunch of people in like a mining colony decided to like get on a ship and like go to the other side of the universe. And it took them like 200 years, but then they did. And now they're there. This also is a good time to bring up the fact that even though space is obviously three-dimensional, the way that the logic of the space galactic corridors is entirely on a two-dimensional plane, and it makes no sense.
Could you go into a little bit more about how space travel works? Like, is it faster than light?
I will go into that very shortly.
Okay, good.
And then finally, we have the Phazani. Now, the Phazani are technically a vassal of the Empire, but they're like allowed. They're sort of more like a merchant republic. It's more. It's very easy to say, yeah. They're space Jews. We're Jews out in space. But more accurately, they're like space Venetians more than anything else. In terms of both like the way they like secretly try to take over Europe, and they are also really, really wealthy and play both sides, all sides in a conflict in order to
space
maximize
Jews
their
are
profit.
already redundant. Jews already come from space.
True. Okay, so backstory. So in 2039, we have what's called the 13-Day War, which is a massive nuclear war between all the nations of Earth. Which is, this is only revealed in the novel, but I thought it was funny. The names of the major powers are the United States of Eurafrica and the Northern Condominium. This destroys like basically all of civilization on anywhere important. The rest of
oh no, not Eurafrica.
The human population is reduced to like less than 1 billion, and after 90 years or so, the remaining nations of Earth are united under a single banner, which is the United Earth Government. And the capital is based on basically the only place that didn't get fucked up, which is Australia.
I was going to ask about Australia,
which is
like,
now the world superpower.
Because, like, obviously, Australia
Yeah.
can't be part of either Eurafrica or the Northern Continent.
Yeah. So, like, the major societies still are, like, Taiwan, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and, like, Micronesia and,
Is there
like, Hawaii.
any Bogan culture at all?
They don't go into it? I would assume so.
Japan is not part
Space
of Micronesia.
Yeah.
Linguistically.
Nothing like really important historically happens until like 2360 when warp travel is invented as a means of interstellar travel. It's basically like warp travel and everything else, but it does have like dangerous side effects on the human body, potentially. For example, like pregnant women can't do it because it will like completely fuck up the baby's DNA really bad. Like it'll just scramble it like a microwave, basically, for lack of a better term. And then, like, 30 years after that, they finally, like, perfect the technology, which allows for, like, safe and efficient, faster-than-light travel between the stars. So they do also have, like, fusion reactor, like, they go forward, What am I looking for here? Rockets. They're, like, they shoot out, jets. They have jets. But they also have, like, a warp drive. And it's not brought up very often, but it is brought up that, like, you can't really do it in the middle of a battlefield or like on demand because it takes a while to charge up, and it'll cause a huge like rupture in space-time like around everything you do it at. So if you do it like and try to escape a battle, for example, you'll kill like all of your entire fleet. So it's like very, very against the law.
Well, then just get one big ship and do it.
Yeah, or something like that. There's some reason they don't. It's never brought up in any of the battles. Like, no one does like a suicide attack with one, so I assume it's there's something that prevents it from happening.
That's just
I
a
don't
general
remember.
thing in a lot of sci-fi things too.
Yeah.
Unspoken rule.
2400, the first habitable planet other than Earth is discovered, and colonization, finally starts outright.
What's it called? New planet.
Canopus.
One shot at naming a planet.
Over time, after about 20 years, they sort of make like a space defense corps, which is like a formal navy, and eventually becomes the Space Force, the military branch of the United Earth government.
He knew. What did he know?
Yeah.
Was he watching? Were Trump and Barron watching Logue together?
Honestly, Barron probably. You guys seen his food at Amazon drawing, right? That man, So, and then in 2620, which is where I think I put the beginning, that's essentially marks the end of what's called the hegemonic Earth era, where like Earth is important at all.
Does that work, by the way? Does that work now?
It works. You might have to wait a while for the phone to die down, though.
Okay. Yeah, let us know.
But you can hit it up. And then, at the height of its power, the sphere of influence is about 94 light years, and at this point, Earth's natural resources are finally completely depleted. 100%. The Earth is now completely dependent on trade with colonies for all of its survival. Also, it's mentioned very briefly, like, the soil is all fucked up, too, basically, because of, like, overproduction. Yeah. That's never going to happen here. Desertification, total myth. So we have what's called the interregnum era, which is basically a lot of political strife happens. So the
Doesn't
colony.
that word mean the time in between?
Yeah, it means the time in between kingdoms, basically.
Could I have a little bit of fun?
I blame you, Spence. Is that actually planned?
That's some good fun. Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
That's some good fun. Fast and easy.
I was pouring one out for all the lives lost in the space
complex. Yeah, exactly. So it's around this time that like the colony world start making like formal protests. Like they're basically it literally is turning into like America like 3.0, where like they're like no taxation without representation, and like we're literally providing you with all of your food and wealth, and we're getting nothing. So fuck you. And then they basically like start rising up in rebellion. There's like a huge brutal war from like the Earth government against like the colonies. I'm not going to go into it too hard. It's mostly formed on a planet called Sirius though, and they start forming a propaganda campaign against anti-Earth. And this war ends with the Battle of Sol, which Sol is our sun, by the way, if you don't know. The colonial powers form a blockade around all of like the solar system that we have, and then assault Earth and kill almost all of Earth's population, lay waste to the surface, glass it almost completely, and Earth's population is less than 100 million now again.
God, I can't wait.
Yeah. Now, then the former prime minister of the colonies becomes the dictator of the Syrian Republic. Then a neutron bomb explodes like a year later in the capital. The guy is dead, and so is almost everyone. And there's like a power struggle, blah, blah, blah. And then out of the power struggle, the Galactic Federation happens. Now, I didn't say this in my things, but they start one of 4 new calendars that will be brought into existence in the course of the story. But this is now 1 UC, which I believe stands for Universal Calendar. It's basically just like, it's space democracy. It's kind of, they don't really talk a lot about it. The golden age of humanity begins here. 100 years of massive exploration, colonization. The world's looking pretty good. Then, after about 100 years, there's like a bunch of pirates become a bigger problem, and there's like tons and tons of pirate-based attacks, and they start going on like wars, and they try to eradicate them as much as possible. And then around this time as well is when the golden age of humanity ends, and mass degeneracy starts. And now in the anime, so the way that they talk about the backstory of the anime is they can't really fit it in anywhere, so they have like one episode where like one of the main characters is like on his way from one planet to another, and he's like, I'm gonna watch a history documentary, and then it's like a 20-minute like History Channel documentary explaining the backstory. In the books, they sprinkled in a lot more evenly, and spend like the first like 3 chapters talking about it. But yeah, so anyway, so in the anime, so here's a quote from it. Basically, it's the democratic republic form of government lost the ability to renew itself, and as people began showing interest only in their own needs and desires, society turned to mob rule. It trod the road towards decadence. They turned to promiscuity, alcoholism, drug use, and mysticism. And the thing they use for this sentence is like a bunch of like fat like strippers, like in like a club with a bunch of like dudes like throwing money at them, and like they basically look like the plus size, like they look like Lizzo. Actually, they look like Lizzo, and you can see their like disgusting like fat bodies and like tits. It's really gross.
That's not happening here.
Yeah, just wait. It only gets better. So there, another quote. So going on, they sought stimulation by speed or violence. Accidents and crimes escalated. The tendency to take life lightly and mock morality deepened. They show this by like people just like street racing on the road and like running into pedestrians, bystanders walking by in the street mindlessly. It's like a child and a man lay on the ground brutalized with their heads bashed in, with like people holding bloody pipes, and like the rich people are just like holding hands on their way to like Macy's, and like there's just like a bunch of like dead hoodlums like in the street, like blood on the pavement basically. So things are getting bad. Good thing that that's totally fiction and none of that is happening in real life, right, guys?
I suppose that's why speedrunners are a new archetype.
Yeah. And the Petersonians. That's sort of what I want to treat it. It's also important, they briefly bring up here that part of the reason that things have gotten so bad is because religion is basically now non-existent, because after the nuclear holocaust and subsequent 90-year war, no savior appeared, and people lost faith, especially in Christianity, and as well as Islam. And so the lack of religion is described as instrumental to society's degradation in this regard. Luckily, there's a cure, though. In 3068, Rudolf von Goldenbaum is born.
Golden
Bomb,
He
yes.
establishes space juice.
So in the Pirate Wars, Rudolf von Goldenbaum is like a military genius. He leads like but this is in the official lore, and I just thought it was funny that the largest intergalactic pirate group is called the Main Street Pirates. Yeah, exactly. That's
Street.
yeah. I assume they're just supposed to be like gangs, basically, but it's like funny that that's like it's probably what some Japanese person thought would be like sound like a gang name or something.
Yeah. Clearly not understanding.
His victory makes him a national hero. He's like idolized throughout Federation space. He's then promoted to the rank of admiral, retires from the military, and runs for a seat in the Galactic Parliament. And then, for no reason at all, somehow the population decides to vote in Rudolf von Goldenbaum into like, well, let's say maybe like a chancellor sort of seat, let's say. And because the public sees the federal government, for no reason at all. The public doesn't see the federal government as decadent, disorderly, or corrupt. It's just because he was a racist. To them, Rudolph is a man of principle who promises to usher the galaxy into a new golden age, and they aren't wrong either, because society is actually, unironically, really bad right now. After becoming prime minister and chancellor dually at the same time, he elects himself as president for life, abolishing freedom of speech, and establishing a dictatorship. And this begins the imperial era. A new calendar, by the way. Now it's 1 IC, which is also 310 UC, which is also 31010 CE. Rudolf von Goldenbaum reorganizes the Galactic Federation into the Galactic Empire, declares himself the first emperor, and starts going to town, removing degeneracy, removes undesirables, establishes public law and order, makes the justice system less corrupt. For once in like literally 100 years, like trials are actually fair and done without bribery, things like that. The world is improving. And then 10 years, then he's, after about 10 years of this, he starts getting the whole, let's say, the downside of a dictatorship is they start to do the fascist kind of stuff. He declares the Inferior Genes Exclusion Act, which mandates the sterilization of the handicapped and execution of mentally ill. Terminates all forms of social aid for the poor. Base department. Terminates all forms of welfare for the poor. The Department of Social Discipline is formed within the Ministry of the Interior, which is basically like a secret police. And an aristocratic class is created through the selection of superior genetic specimens, who are now the new high nobles, predominantly white, and all are given Germanic names and titles. Then this happens, goes on for 50 more years, and then he dies at the age of 83. He's succeeded by his son, Sigismund I.
Sigismund.
Thank you.
Sigismund.
So after his death, widespread democratic rebellions break out, only to be brutally suppressed. Millions are killed, and then millions more have their citizenship revoked, becoming serfs as punishment for being related to or even known associates of executed rebels. So like it is like a sins of the father kind of old school like imperial system. Like if you were even like rudimentarily associated with someone who disagreed with the government, you were now like all of your wealth was stripped and you were now a serf. About 100 years after this, Arl Heinesen, a serf, masterminds an escape of 400,000 fellow serfs from a labor camp on Altair 7. I don't like going into more than that. And then after 60 years, I'm not going to do the actual math. They go to the other side of the galaxy, and they call it. This is known as the Long March of 10,000 light years. They discover a habitable world on which to settle, and they name the planet Heinesen after the guy.
After the beer.
Yeah, after the They then established the Democratic Free Planets Alliance and revived the old Universal Calendar, removing the Imperial Calendar.
So on all the wiki entries for this kind of shit, is there 4 or 5 different calendar entries for all
Yes.
the dates related to things?
In fact, I have all of them on here, but I didn't write them on here because it'd be too annoying.
It'd be too much.
Yeah. It's like you guys aren't going to know, like, oh yeah, in 470 IC.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So like, yeah. So
Remember, what were the minions doing in 470 IC?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Isn't it convenient in the Minions movie that they just like were like trapped somewhere the entirety of Hitler's reign only for that 5 years? Because they always follow the most despicable evil leader.
Did they really
They
put
do
it
this
into the
in
lore?
the movie.
It's
In the movie.
And this was post the meme of people being like, who was working for Hitler?
That's actually.
Yeah,
good
so
lore.
in the Minions movie, the lore is that they work for the most evil person. They work for like King Tut. They work for Napoleon. But then after Napoleon, they got stuck in a cave, and then they came out of very modern times. So they completely skipped over Hitler.
That's
Reading that,
I thought they just didn't.
Yeah.
It implies that they would have worked for.
Well, I mean, yeah.
No, you could have. I mean, you could have just said like the Minions worked for Stalin. Or,
It's because they didn't. The people who made the movie didn't want them to know that he actually would have worked for Winston Churchill.
the Minions worked for Harry Truman.
Okay, so aesthetics of the Free Planets Alliance. The military uniforms look like this. So the Free Planets Alliance, it's very tempting to say, oh, they're Space America, but that's really not true at all. The best way I would describe the Free Planets Alliance is sort of like, turn down a little bit. The best way I would describe them is sort of like a platonic ideal of like parliamentary democracy. Mm-hmm. They don't really follow any aesthetics or like governmental trappings of any like known existing like cultural democracies, but rather like have their own like new kind of thing. So it is like they have like a high council of like 13 chair people that are all elected, and then like a national diet that is like a representative Congress basically. And unlike in modern day where like we only live on one planet and it makes no sense to have representatives because representatives were more of a thing when like travel was like it took literally like 10 weeks to get from Georgia to New York. It also takes 10 weeks to get from fucking Aldebaran to fucking Heinesen, right? So like representatives actually make sense. And then they kind of just have their alliance for like about 150 years. At this point, the Empire discovers their existence. Kaiser Friedrich III declares the Alliance to be insurgents against the supreme authority of the Empire, and the Alliance and Imperial War begins. I just thought it was funny, so I included that Lin Pao leads the Alliance fleet into battle against Grand Duke Herbert at the Dagon Star Zone. Yeah. Lin Pao's
Wait, is
fleet.
that a Dune reference?
Yeah.
Oh!
Lin Pao's fleet soundly
Possibly
defeats
Herbert
the Imperial forces. Grand Duke Herbert falls from Imperial favor, and then Kaiser Friedrich III dies of illness. Is that how you pronounce that, by the way?
Wait,
Friedrich.
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 You
Let's
wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Friedrich. Yeah.
Friedrich is acceptable. Freddy.
There's a bunch more battles over the course of like 100 years, basically. Kaiser Cornelius I leads another like terrific loss. I forgot to mention, by the way, sorry, this is important though. But when Golden Bomb took power, it began what's called the Golden Bomb Dynasty, which exists uninterrupted for like nearly, I think, like 400 years or something, basically. Okay. There's another big alliance victory, and then the other big thing is that in 3556 CE, Iserlohn Fortress is constructed, and what is now known as the Iserlohn Corridor. So again, and I was hoping they might explain this a little more, and maybe they did because I did speed read through the novels a little bit before the lecture. For most of the ones that I was already familiar with the anime scenes for, but there's basically like only there's like the Imperial side of space and the Alliance side of space, right? And the only ways between these two are between like two corridors. Now, why space has corridors is never fully explained. That's what I was hoping for, but they basically say something like there's like a supermassive black hole in the middle. And then, like, smaller, like, galactic, like, solar winds and stuff that, like, but they're a real thing, to be fair.
But like, in this context.
Yeah. So there's two passages, one that leads through Fazan, and then one that leads to the Iserlohn Corridor, which is now, sitting in the direct middle of it is Iserlohn Fortress, which is essentially a Death Star. It's a little cooler than the Death Star, though. First of all, they actually like go into the detail about like how it actually like makes sense for it to like survive as like an independent entity. There's like 5 million people living there. They have like all these like they have essentially like an entire. I mean, it's like the size of New York City basically, in living in one big Death Star. And the way that it's defended is a little bit cooler. So they do have like the big laser. They call it the Thor hammer, for the record. But they also have this like dual layer armor on the outside that like one of the layers is like liquid, like it's like mercury or something, which is like, and like because it's like in space, and it like holds its shape properly through the gravity and stuff. And this like is really really good at like preventing lasers from doing anything. They can't really penetrate the liquid very well. So Iserlohn Fortress is essentially impregnable from like any sort of like actual strike, including nuclear weapons. What?
Who controls it right now?
The Empire built it and they control it.
Okay.
And then no major events happen until 3567, where Yang Wenli is born, one of our main characters. Yang Wenli is this guy right here. Okay, he's based. He's literally me. About 10 years later, Reinhard von Mussel is born, who is this guy right here. He is also very based, but he is not literally me. So I'm just gonna. So about 20 years pass for both these, and then this is where the characters are at these point in times, which is we're finally to like the beginning of the actual story, which is right here. So Yang Wenli up to this point. So Yang Wenli is composed from two Chinese characters, the former meaning power and might, and the latter meaning benefit/profit or logic, depending on use and context. He's the son of an alliance merchant. So in the alliance, because this is one of the things that I also talk about with like the destruction of Earth and how it's become like basically irrelevant now. They sort of like lost any idea of like what race truly is.
God damn it. Sorry.
They're good. They've lost idea of what race truly is, and so they only have like 3 descriptions of races in the Alliance now, which is Western, Eastern, and Southern. It is known that he is an Eastern, the Alliance merchant Eastern, who really loved antiques. His dad is like Pendle. He's described as looking like Morshu and acting like Morshu, which is really funny to me. But he's encouraged by his father to do whatever he wants, and Yang Wenli develops a love for history, especially like old Earth battle history and things like that. His father dies at 16, and it turns out that his antique collection that he spent all of his time devoted to is completely worthless because it's all filled with fraudulent antiques, with the exception of like a couple artifacts, and he owes a ton of debt due to mortgaging something right before he died in an accident. Yang is now penniless and is forced to enroll in the Military Officer Academy and the War History Department, is what his major is. He gets barely above passing grades in almost every subject besides history, nearly last in his class by junior year, and he is a gifted slacker king, just like me, for real, I wrote that in my notes. During junior year, the War History Department is dissolved, because, like, there wasn't enough interest, or they didn't feel like it was, important enough.
History stuff.
History style, yeah, the end of history. But since he's now, like, not enlisted, but enlisted off, you know the term, Cole.
He's not.
Yeah, he's an officer now. He can't, like, just, like, drop out. So he has to, like, switch to a different major. And so he goes into the military tactical departments, which is the only other class that he wasn't getting D pluses in.
Be careful.
What's up?
Oh, just public service
Little
announcement for Doug.
crumbs like that one.
Oh, gotcha. You can turn the music back up, too, though. So he turns out to be a incredible natural genius of warfare. He's like, because he studied so much of, like, they talk about, like, he's, Caesar, Hannibal, blah, 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 he's big history, military tactics guy. There's an early scene where he dabs on the yuppie, like, prep star, like, student in, like, a war sim game, which is described as, they don't say it's like this, but, like, my interpretation that it seems very much like space StarCraft, basically.
Isn't
Yeah,
StarCraft already space
Well,
StarCraft?
but like with humans, sorry, with humans and stuff. And the reason he does is he wins by like being like the gayest player known to man, where he like does nothing but run away and then attack the supply lines from the back.
Just really good micro.
He was like Kotal.
Yeah, he would be. I wrote in my notes, this will be a running theme that you will come into later. And then the guy like scrub quotes and copes at him, which is really like, you only won because you had to use these gay tactics to beat me. You're not shit. Yeah. Wow. Wow. You had to attack my supply lines to beat me. Wow.
I lost because you outplayed me.
Yeah. So anyway, he graduates from the military tactics department like with A pluses in all of his tactics classes, but in terms of total standing, he graduates like, I think they actually go out of the way to say that he graduates like as the exact median person in his class. And then so he goes in the army and he fucks around, he has like minor, whatevers. His first notable event is on El Fusil. He's 21 now, and he's stationed as a sub-lieutenant on El Fusil. I'm not sure this is a real level and like real military, but it's essentially like a progressive level rank for like an academy CO just out of academy, basically. He serves under a rear admiral named Arthur Lynch. The rear admiral is the second most junior flag officer, equivalent to major general. Yang is now Arthur Lynch. There's like an imperial invasion of this like star space, and they're gonna absolutely come in and destroy everything on Alpha Seal. Arthur Lynch is like a huge pussy and just like leaves with like the entire Alliance fleet, leaving behind 5 million civilians. And Yang is still there and is now the highest in command and coordinates an impromptu evac with like merchant ships, the Fazani, cargo ships, etc., saving the entire population. To distract from the disaster that the Alliance abandoned all of their citizenry, the media now focus. By the way, this may not surprise you to know, but in the democratic space, the media is controlled by the government, and they selectively choose what to report on.
Not the Pisani.
Yeah, not the Pisani.
Which is how you know that they're...
Which is true, yeah. They're not Jews, they're Venetian. They don't.
Because they also helped evacuate civilians.
That's true, actually, yeah, but only for a price, right? Like, they don't, like, control the media, they don't control the banks, they're just merchants.
God.
5 million seems like a lot, honestly.
It is a lot. But we'll get into the, like, at this is something we'll talk about more later, but at this stage in history, like, galactic population is so huge, and people become so numb to it that, like, the losses of life are, like, massive in these wars. Like, absolutely horrifically large losses of life. But anyway, so distract from the disaster, the Alliance media and military start calling him, like, the hero of Alpha Seal to push the narrative and conveniently ignore the reason why Alpha Seal needed to be saved by a hero in the first place. He's promoted from the incident to lieutenant commander and a double promotion, which is like equivalent to major in this thing. He then like fucks around a bit, like in various deployments. He's a second in command to some guy. You can turn down a little bit if you don't mind. He's known for being a political troublemaker due to his passive yet clear admonishments of military policies. One example of this is that there was what's called the Third Battle of Tiamat, where military negligence had led to the loss of several merchant ships and one cruiser, which remained dedicated to its assigned duties. When asked on his opinion on the matter by the media, Yang noted that the lost crew would have been better off with one more ship than medals from posthumous, award ceremonies. And Yang was then quickly shooed away from reporters by the Secret Service following this comment. After this, there's basically follows a series of battles where Yang correctly predicts what will happen and what the best course of strategy is as second in command, and then the lieutenant actual commander ignores his advice, calls him a pussy bitch faggot, and then literally millions of troops dies because they don't listen to him. Yang's big thing, slacker genius, and he has very L from Death Note kind of energy, and that he every time, even when he starts commanding troops, he just kind of sits he just sits like this, or just sleeping during every battle, basically.
He's always drunk in every battle.
Yeah.
One of those guys?
Yeah, that's this guy right here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Yang Winley. You can't see. Yeah, that's Yang Winley right
More like Wang Yinli.
Yeah.
Wait, so is that true? Is he drinking during all the battles?
Yes. I'll get into that more later, but yeah, he's a total drunk. He's basically drunk every battle. And also he's loosely based on some Korean guy who is considered he's considered the Asian equivalent to Admiral Nelson, who never. Actually, I shouldn't say that. It'll spoil stuff for Yang Wenli, but yeah, he's based on both Admiral Nelson and a Korean guy who's like Admiral Nelson, apparently. All right, so Reinhard von Musel, who is this guy? So he's born to a middle class. He's an imperial, if you couldn't tell. He's born to a middle class, noble and name only family. These are known as the Imperial Knights or the Reichsritter, to a single father and his sister Anna Rose. Anna Rose is when you imagine the most boring, sensitive, maiden princessy type of character, that's this character. Some fairy tale, sensitive, dumb bitch energy, basically. Fun fact, he's voiced by Captain Falcon and Vegeta, the same guy who does both of those.
Same time.
Yeah, he does both the voices at the same time. So as a kid, he gets a new neighbor named Siegfried Kierkeis, who is this guy right here. Siegfried is this guy's his homie. They ride together, they die together. He's sort of the boring best friend archetype. He has very little personality aside from being smart and reserved. I will say that it's a very realistic kind of boring personality, and they go into how boring he truly is. Although it's definitely portrayed as him being the more sensitive and compassionate and thoughtful type, as contrasted to Reinhard, who is very stubborn, abrasive, and decisive. This is something I wanted to bring up, and I'm glad you were here, Sam. It's part of the reason I wanted to delay, is because this is something that I suspect is a trope in translated Asian literature, where they use like things that I imagine sound actually poetic in the original language to describe how his appearance is. But like in English, they're translated as like he had hair that looked like rubies and a blood red crimson sun. You know.
The one weird thing that I've noticed in those Chinese novels, they'll be like, he had a very wide brow. Like they're always describing how noble, and they'll also they'll be like describing the brow as slight, which I don't really get. But yeah, apparently your hair being like rubies sounds like the same thing. Her eyes were like limpid sapphires. Like,
they say a lot of shit like that.
Yeah, that's very from the Chinese.
Especially when describing these two characters. Both is described as like exceptionally beautiful.
He is.
Yang Wenli is described as a plain retard, which he is. But these two are described as exceptionally beautiful. And it's hard to get a good clarity from this poster, but like in motion, you can't really, especially in the animation, you can't really tell that he is like a twink, basically. All great military commanders were all twinks. Alexander was. Few know this. So it's implied.
It should be noted that he was a twink, but he wanted to be Diogenes, who was probably ugly and fat and old.
Based, yeah.
Extremely based.
So it's implied that Sieg wants to fuck Reinhardt's sister really bad, and Reinhardt's sister also wants to fuck Sieg really bad. So to describe Reinhardt's character, Reinhardt is sort of like, in a word, like razor sharp. He's like beautiful, polished, refined, with like a non-trivial, like graceful sort of ruthlessness. He has like natural, real charisma and genius, and it's legitimately like a very compelling and well-written like genius character. Because it's same with Yang actually for this point, but like it is very difficult in fiction, I think, to like write characters that are geniuses without making them Mary Sue's and like uninteresting. Which I think Legend of Dr. Heroes does mostly very well, with the exception of this character right here, who we'll talk about later, is a Mary Sue, and I hate it. But for example, of what I mean, there's a scene in Reinhardt's childhood where they're at school, and some like upper noble kid, you know, like he's like they're in the classroom, and the upper noble kid like sticks his foot out in front of Reinhardt while he's walking to his desk, like, and Reinhardt like politely and forcefully like tells him like, please move your leg. And the kid just like smirks at him, and the whole class starts laughing at Reinhardt. And Kierkeis is like about to get up to go help Reinhardt, and Reinhardt just like without even like flinching his like perfect like regal posture, like the most like poised like open hand slap across his face, and then like commands him to move his leg in the exact same tone, and the whole class is just kind of like awestruck. And the kid just like complies without saying anything. Basically, it's a really cool scene.
Or the voice.
Later in the afternoon, the kid tries to like ambush Reinhardt in the park and like fight him and mock him. Reinhardt kicks him in the balls, then ground and pounds him, beating him mercilessly to a bloody pulp until Kierkeis sees him and pulls him off of him. The kid runs away, and Reinhardt flatly replies, word for word, the quote from the spy from TF2, "You got blood on my suit." Him and Kierkeis then like get into the park fountain and have what I can only and truly unironically describe as an extremely gay water splash fight in the park fountain. And there's multiple cuts. There's like multiple cuts of them like smiling, like looking at each other with sparkles in their eyes. And they like, ah, and they're like split. And then it cuts to like a scene of them naked together in the same bed with their wet clothes drying while Anna Rose brings them tea or something. And needless to say, whenever people, there will be a lot of people who are like big Legend of Dr. Heroes fans because it's like the smart man's anime. So especially on 4chan, you'll see a lot of people, and these people are also generally the type that are like, I hate fags, you know, like but like the people who say that there is absolutely no homosexual subtext with Reinhardt's character are full of shit, and they don't know what they're talking about. Can someone do something with these? They came off.
I'll eat them.
Base. So a couple months after this scene, his deadbeat alcoholic father essentially sells his sister Anna Rose into sexual servitude as an imperial consort to Kaiser Friedrich IV himself with an insanely large dowry paid for by the Kaiser. take this one too. No, it just actually there's grapefruit peel.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you were pointing to the punch.
Punch.
Yeah, it came out surprisingly bitter for something with no hops.
Yeah.
Which I think because I got a when I was at the place also the guy I was buying juniper berries and the guy was like, oh, just go outside, we have a juniper tree, you can just take as much as you want. So it has like fresh juniper berries and like needles and stuff in it too, which I think contributed to the bitterness.
Yeah.
But I think it's good though.
I like it.
Does the foam calm down?
No, but if you just spray it in a glass and let it sit.
And wait.
Yeah, you just gotta
Sure,
wait
right.
for a bit.
Yeah, wait for a couple hours.
Yeah.
I am now intrigued.
Yeah, go for go in like a big stein. We have some in there. You might need to wash one of them out though. There might be like dog hair in it, but. All right, I'll wait a sec. Does anyone have any questions in the meantime?
Asked about the date thing. Oh, you've mentioned another work that the Doctor. By the way, does he just go as Dr. Tanaka in all
That's just
professional
what
spheres?
it's Dr. Yoshiki Tanaka.
That's base.
Yeah.
What is he? Of mythology. and stuff.
Comparative mythology and
Comparative
literature.
mythology. That's cool. Focused on China.
Yeah, focused mostly on China
You
and
said he was a
yeah.
sign
Yeah.
of his thing.
Legend of the Dragon Kings and
Legend of the
something
Dragon
else.
Kings. Did you look up anything about that? I kind of want to look that up.
No, I just was I browsed the Wikipedia page briefly, but essentially from what I understand, it's like a satire of like Chinese myth.
The satire, like parody, like funny.
Yeah. I don't know much more than
I
that.
try to watch it.
I don't know if I think it has an anime adaptation, but
I've read a lot of the Chinese myths now, so we kind of want to see.
and I've heard Arslan Senki is good too, actually, for what it's worth. The one that's based on like
How do you spell the second word?
SCN Kai.
S-E-N-K-I.
Yeah, SCNKI. Or also known as the heroic legend of Arslan.
Hey,
which is-
how do you spell that? Theta, gamma,
Yeah.
tau.
Okay, so where was it? So sister sold into sexual servitude. So Reinhardt is fucking pissed. He pledges with Kierkeis to destroy the Golden Bomb dynasty. Outright yelling Lay's Majesty in the middle of a public park to him to say this, and rescue his sister. He immediately transfers to military school because he believes it's the fastest way to advance in the nobility, and Kierkeis joins him. If they had never taken his sister, the universe would probably be a lot different. Spoiler. Graduates early on, like at 16 or 17, top of his class, along with Kierkeis, who was second in his class, resented by all of the upperclassmen, but respected and admired by his underclassmen and peers. Notable early incident in his military career is that he gets in trouble with a CO because he mercilessly beats a serviceman for abusing and raping a civilian woman. To a bloody pulp. He's like, the guy's like out of commission for it's talking about like 6 months or something. Like absolutely destroys him. There are various minor military incursions where he shows his like genius and climbs the ranks. We're not going to talk about them. Most of them aren't in the original books. They're like prequel content released years later, and some of them are like anime prequel content that was released years later, and they're anime only too. But anyway, by 19, he's already a full admiral of command of a fleet. He has a special, one-of-a-kind warship called Broomfield, which has advanced command and control equipment for better fleet direction. He does some shit where he detonates a nuke in a gas giant and wipes out an Alliance fleet. It's important to note that Yang Wenli was in this battle, predicts this, and warns the commander, but the commander refuses to listen, and Yang deserts with a bunch of his homies and saves some fellow soldiers by stealthily maneuvering his escaped battleship into the heart of the fleet, right under the Brunhild, hold Reinhardt hostage, and then they eventually let Yang and his other guys go. After this, Reinhardt is promoted to High Admiral, which is essentially like a 3.5 bar officership in between Fleet Admiral and Admiral. This is like a campaign theater commander controlling very large fleets and like a department head, chief of staff kind of role. He's given the title of Count von Lohengrin. It's never really clearly established what the actual titles are in the Empire, but it's from what I know, a new county is like one planet in the Empire, basically, and like a duke controls multiple planets.
Now, how is Lohengrin spelled?
L, and then I think O with an umlaut, and then, or not umlaut, the double, this shit right here.
Yeah.
The 2 dots, and then Hengramm.
Okay. Yeah. So like Lover, like lion.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably what it's meant to be. I'm glad you're here to translate that. So yeah, everyone in the aristocracy is super butthurt, and they're jealous because they think he's like a young brat who got his position primarily to the fact that the Kaiser is fucking his sister, and not only fucking his sister, but the Kaiser really likes his sister. He's like his favorite bottom bitch.
He's simping.
Yeah, he's simping for his sister. Although in reality, Reinhard is actually accomplished, and they just ignore it. But that doesn't stop the nobility from being really, really jealous. And now we finally get to the first actual scene in the story. Congratulations, which is the Battle of Astarte. I think it's like Astarte. They pronounce it in the anime as Astarte, but that's just like how Japanese.
The start of the story.
Astarte?
Wait, what?
Because it's the start of the story.
Can we just talk about 40K?
Oh yeah, actually that might be related.
Is it if it's ASTARTE?
That is how it's spelled.
Then it's the same.
I wonder which one influenced me. When did Warhammer 40K start?
I mean, it was a tabletop game all the way back into the 80s, I think.
Yeah, it might be.
40K? Maybe not
was
the
heavily
80s.
inspired by it, so probably pretty early 50s, 40s.
My Doom is inspired by 40K. That's a base take. History's falsified.
But 40K in turn was heavily inspired by Star Wars.
Now you're triggering me.
Alright, so at this point, by the way, this battle takes place on January 1st. January 1st, 3597 CE. At this point, I just feel it's important to mention that in the books, they talk about the following stats for this battle, which is the relative national power of each state according to economists, which is Empire 48%, Alliance 40%, and Fazan 12%. The total population of humanity is around. I'll wait. It's fine. I'll wait.
I'm listening.
No, wait, Joel is
I'm just getting.
Okay, every 40-year-old fucking
Oh,
English teacher I've ever
yeah.
had. Is
Mrs. McGowan fucking like getting mad. Yeah.
Is there another chair he can sit in?
You can sit in this one. I can sit there.
Okay.
Actually,
And if you guys both get tired, I can bring out like the shitty office chair I have.
I'm going to listen to you while you're
Okay. Okay, so at the height of Federation prosperity before Rudolf von Goldenbaum, the human population was about 300 billion. It's now around 40 billion. Reinhard is ordered to invade Alliance space with 20,000 vessels. However, the most powerful, noble, and total Malder, Duke Braunschweig, leaks this info to the Pisani leader Adrian Rubinsky, who looks like Lex Luthor. Rubinsky then leaks this info to the Alliance, who dispatched the 2nd, 4th, and 6th fleets, which are around 15,000, 12,000, and 1,300 ships, respectively, for a total of around 40,000 ships. They're bigger in number than Reinhard fleets, but individually weaker. So Reinhard forced marches and advanced to destroy each one individually before they can link up, need it or keep it. Almost entirely wiping out the 4th and 6th fleets, Yang is stationed on the 2nd fleet and tries to prevent the loss of the 6th fleet. He tries to prevent the loss of the 6th fleet by instructing the acting officer to not try and save the 4th fleet, who is already too late and under fire. The officer ignores him and tries to save them, but is too late, and the 2nd fleet starts losing too. In that battle, the admiral is killed by like an I-beam falling on him after a laser battery like shakes the ship. Yang assumes command and does a genius retreat to escape the battlefield with almost all the 2nd fleet.
Genius retreat.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about I'm not going into it, but yeah, they talk about it. He manages to return to Heinesen with 80% strength and is the only fleet that returns in its almost entirety. The rest of them are almost at 20% strength by the time they return. Yang is the only fleet that saves. Reinhard sends him like a video message that says, essentially like sick play, bro. nice work. GG. RE soon. So at this point, this is when like the first like scale of the loss of life is like really truly brought up. Like each of these ships has like 100,000 people on it. We're talking like imagine like each ship that's blown up, like the entire like half the population of Kansas City is just gone, basically. So in this one battle, that was like a relatively like minor battle, the Empire loses 153,000 troops and the Alliance loses around 2 million. and that's just kind of like normal for this situation now.
We haven't gotten to World War II levels yet.
I mean, that was like the entirety of World War II, basically.
Really?
Yeah, they lost less than you thought.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What was World War One?
I don't know.
The world was smaller back then.
But anyway, so even with Yang's clever escape, Reinhardt has now beaten a combined force. Reinhardt has beaten a combined force twice the size of his own in a stunning and overwhelming victory, and Reinhardt is forced to be made a fleet admiral, an unprecedented achievement as someone his age. He is now 21. He has his own admiralty and commands 1/3 of the total Imperial forces. He now puts together his own commanders who are also all young and either commoners or lesser nobility. And they had all been in low-ranking positions, and their talent/initiative unrecognized and unappreciated by hierarchical and largely high-born senior officers. We'll go over the important ones in a little bit, but first we need to talk about the Alliance side. Yang goes back to Heinesen, and here we learn about Julian Mintz, who is that guy right there, who is the actual Mary Sue of the story. This is Yang's. Similarly to Reinhardt, Yang also has a younger white boy that he is grooming.
Real quick, the blonde guy is Reinhardt, right?
Yeah.
No. Oh yeah.
The top one.
Yeah.
And then the
Mintz. Yeah, you just
beige
introduced
guy
him.
is Julian. It's Julian. I'm so tempted to say the Latin pronunciation of his name. But yeah, if you thought only Reinhardt had a weird homoerotic thing, don't worry, Yang does too. So because of massive war deaths over the course of the Imperial Alliance War, the government has instituted a sort of military orphan foster care system for other soldiers, and they pay you a ton of money to take care of some orphan kid basically. Yeah, true. But to be fair, this is on the Alliance side.
Oh.
But yeah. So Yulian is Yang. Actually, I'm gonna say Yulian because that's actually how they pronounce it in the Japanese. So I'm just gonna keep saying that. It's Yulian. Yeah. Yulian is Yang's foster kid. He's 15 or something at this point in the story. Yang's 30 or something, near 30 or at 30, around that age. Yulian is essentially faultless. He's polite, smart, and insightful. He basically functions as Yang's boy wife who walks around in an apron and low-cut shorts, cleaning up after Yang and cooks for him while Yang gets drunk, naps, and plays chess. He's just like me, for real, for real. It's noted that Yang's house is even worse than my old ones at their worst, and the flashback scene where Yulian arrives essentially looks like the damn bitch you live like this when Yulian first arrives and Yulian comments and says almost that exact thing. This is the scene where it's first revealed that Yang essentially does all of his commanding drunk because he puts brandy in all of his tea and asks Yulian to keep doing it, which Yulian admonishes him for, but then keeps doing it. And this is the famous line where Yang says the following: "Humanity has been drinking alcohol since 5,000 years ago, and they're still drinking it now. Alcohol is humanity's friend. How could I abandon a friend?"
What does Julian do?
He fills up the glass. For the listener.
Nani.
So anyway, in the aftermath of this battle, the government media is again basically covering up the horrific, unprecedented military disaster, but promoting the story about how Yang's the hero of Astarte now as well. Astarte. And he's promoted to Rear Admiral in the big ceremony. Now, we need to talk about Job Trunicht, who I forgot to get a picture of, and I just realized. But Job Trunicht... Okay.
Horrible things happen to this person.
Job Trunicht is the defense chairman, and this guy is okay. So picture a slimy used car salesman, right? Now picture the Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan version of the used car salesman, and that's Job Trunicht, the ascended final form of the slime ball used car salesman politician. That's Job Trunicht. He's incredible, unprecedentedly, almost. And in fact, Reinhardt actually comments later in the story about how it's almost profound and how utterly awestruck he was at just how shameless and slimy Job Trunicht truly is. But he's an important character. So it's also slowly understood over the course of the story that Job controls what are known as the Patriotic Night Corps, which are a paramilitary.
Night Corps?
Yeah. Yeah. 1, 2, 7, 3. So yeah, they're a paramilitary pseudo black shirt like hoodlums that violently attack people seen as like anti-patriotic or like anti-freedom. Notably, this usually means people that disagree with Trunick. Before awarding Yang the medal, Trunick gives this big speech to a crowd of like 100,000 about the noble sacrifices made by the men who all died and the advancement of freedom and the resistance to tyranny. Yang internally comments about how they were all like slaughtered by like animals for nothing. And the speech just noted that like when he finally stops and gets up and claps, Yang is the only person who like sits there, sitting down, crossing his arms, and refuses to stand. And like he pisses off like a lot of the military by doing this, like like visibly. And Trunick also notices it and is very mad. Right up at the end, some lady comes up and basically says like Trunick's a fag. Those men died for nothing, and gives a typical like fortunate son kind of style, like you talk big for someone who never steps any foot in danger yourself. Kind of anti-war speech, it's never your kids going out there and dying. And it's revealed that like this woman is like a bitch that like Yang had like one-itis for in college, but was like a huge pussy and could like never work up the courage, and so she like married his best friend instead.
Oh my god.
Her name is Jessica Edwards. And her husband died in the last battle, and that's why she came up and said that. Trunick says another famous quote from the story, which is he just like basically like Sir's like, guards, this woman has clearly lost her composure. And they just like shove her off stage and like arrest her.
Into the infirmary.
Yeah, she ends up becoming like the opposition candidate. It's not really that important, but I thought the scene was funny and was worth mentioning. Yang is promoted to Rear Admiral formally here. He's back to give a speech, and he basically says, well, let's win so we don't die. And then like everyone claps awkwardly because they don't know what to say, and he just like autistically like shuffles off stage. So he meets with the chief of staff guy who, and I'm not making this up, is named Sidney Sithole.
Actually, that is he the black one?
He is the black one.
Yes, it's probably Sithole.
Oh,
which is an actual like sub-Saharan African name.
Okay, that makes. From what I read, all the names are real.
Yeah.
It's not like African names for the black characters too.
Like Julian, he will continue to refer to him as Simple.
But the fact that it's literally one letter away from shithole. It's not hard to get away. By the way. So anyway, Sidney Sithole was actually the dean of the opera school that Yang was at, and they have like a bunch of banter about how much of like a piece of shit based slacker Yang was. It's like, look at you, because like apparently like Sithole was the one who like tried to convince Yang to go into the military tactics because he knew that he would be great. He could like recognize his greatness early on and like push him towards it. He was basically like the cool professor, basically. And so they have like a bunch of good banter in this scene. And Yang is now given command of a new fleet called the 13th Fleet, which is made up of survivors from the 2nd Fleet in the battle he just fought, and other ragtag survivors from various groups. And it's about half the size of a real fleet at about 6,500 ships. They give him half the size because they are afraid of him having a full-size fleet because they think he is too good. Basically, they're legitimately they don't. It's never explicitly said, but Sithole and Yang talk about this fact and sort of mention it in like very colorful language. Yang attempts to refuse and retire, and Sithole refuses his resignation and says that he can't let those men down who he just saved, and that they'll just get killed again with a different commander, and so Yang begrudgingly agrees to command the fleet. Which is true, unfortunately. He appoints some staff officers who are minor characters. We're not going to talk about them, but the only one we're going to talk about is Frederica Greenhill, who is the daughter of another chief of staff, something Greenhill, who I forget, who becomes his, is it attaché, I believe? Attaché and secretary, but really all she does is, like, when Julian isn't around, she, like, cooks, cleans, and brings him his alcohol during the battle. Alright, so now we get to
The second scene in the show?
No.
We are 15 minutes in.
The fall of Izerlon. So, Yang is then told that his first mission is to capture Izerlon Fortress by himself with a fleet half the size of one fleet. He laughs and thinks that Sithole is like giving him a good one, but he's not. So I've already explained the two space corridors and Izalon and how it makes no sense. I wrote in my notes to make sure that it explained how it makes no sense. Here, if I didn't already. This is essentially an insane suicide mission with no chance of success.
So they gave him a half-size squadron and sent them all to battle.
Basically, yes. And Yang initially refuses, but
Evidently having not seen Star Wars.
yeah. But he's convinced by Sithole that it's a win-win situation for him to do it, because either Yang succeeds,
Or he dies.
well, hold on, let me finish.
He doesn't
Yang,
serve the army anymore.
Yang succeeds, and then no one can ignore Yang's talent anymore, and he'll be promoted even higher. Or, and Sithole actually says this explicitly, since Yang, you're so good at retreating and running away, you'll keep your allies alive, and you'll fail in the least deadly way, and perhaps the Alliance will be dissuaded from further war. Yang goes back home, talks about it with Yulian, and decides that if he does succeed, they can use the newfound strategic advantage of the fortress to sue for peace with the Empire and finally end the conflict. At this point, their house is attacked with Molotovs and like high-tech concussion grenades that are used like bricks being thrown through their window by the Patriotic Night Corps because he didn't stand up at the ceremony. They fight them off by apparently they had some like illegal modification to like their like smart home where they can like use their sprinkler system as like 50 civil rights era fire hoses, and they just like spray all the Patriotic Night Corps like away. It's a really funny scene. So Yang concocts a plan for how to get into Izalon, and he decides on essentially like a Trojan horse psyop. There's a section about where they actually talk about how like he mentions that it's a Trojan horse to like Julian, and no one and like a bunch of other people, none of them have any idea what they're talking about because apparently like idiomatic events of history no longer are like relevant in society because of how society developed after the Earth War. So no one even knows like these like basic English idiomatic statements about like war and such as the Trojan horse. His plan hinges on a group in the Alliance known as the Rosen Ritter. The Knights of the Rose. They're a ragtag group of fierce, close combat fighters made up of Imperial exiles, defectors, and deserters, initially created as like a propaganda thing.
Like they spread propaganda?
They were made as like made a battalion, like for propaganda reasons by the Alliance.
Okay.
So basically like, oh yeah, we're so good that like the Imperials
The
defect to
Rose.
us. Yeah.
Oh, I see. So they're not actually that based?
They are very based, but this is a very risky plan and viewed with immense suspicion because out of the 12 commanders the Rosenritter have had, 4 died, 2 were promoted and retired, and the other 6 betrayed the Alliance and went back to the Empire, which is half of the commanders of the unit. Yang goes to the Rosenritter headquarters to meet the commander, Walter von Schenkopf, who I have a picture of here, and you should pass this around.
Okay.
To everyone.
Is this Axe Boy?
This is Axe Boy. This guy's very big. We'll talk about Schenkopf more later, but he's basically like ultimate man's man. He cracks one-liners, is very based, kills a lot of people with an axe, and has loose sex with a lot of women and then leaves them and never talks to them. This will be important later. So he goes into like their headquarters where they're basically like playing pokers and like smoking cigars in a dusty room, and Yang sort of walks in like meekly like into like the saloon scene, like we don't take kindly to your type around here.
Music stops and everything.
Yeah, basically. And they basically call him like a pussy bitch to his face, and like they don't respect him at all. It's actually a really cool scene. It's important to note like that like they even point out that like Yang is like a pasty dweeb, and like Schenkopf is like 6'5" with a chiseled jawline. And same with like all the other soldiers in the Rosenritter who are also all 6'5", like Aryan genetic specimens. Yang explains his plan, which is to have the Rosenritter wear old Imperial uniforms and pretend to be injured scouts with extremely critical and confidential information fleeing from the Alliance fleet, and have them only be able to speak with the commander of Izalon Fortress himself, since no one else is privileged enough to hear it. At that time, they will hold him hostage, fill the command room with Zephyr particles and take control of the big giant laser, the Thor hammer.
What's a Zephyr?
Yes.
So I was about to go into that. So there's actually a little bit of controversy about the name. In the anime, they call them Zephyr particles. In the book, they call them Cephal particles.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And apparently they're named after the guy who invented them in the story, which is Cephal, but I think Zephyr particle is a cooler name, so I'm going to call them Zephyr particle. Zephyr particles, they don't really get into the sciencey part of them, but basically, if you shoot laser around them, it causes a nuclear explosion, everyone dies. So it's basically a way of like preventing anyone from shooting lasers in the vicinity.
I thought you were complaining about Dune in comparison to Log for this very reason.
Yeah.
How
the shields.
Yeah, how Dune shields create a less realistic explanation for why there's like hand-to-hand combat in space than Log.
Well, I'll get into that
Okay.
in a second, but it's important to note that the Zephyr particles are very expensive and a very new technology and are not used basically very often at all.
Okay.
For the most part, the reason why they fight hand-to-hand in ships is
So
not because of the Zephyr particles. In fact, they don't fill the Zephyr particles
Okay.
in the ships.
While we're
Okay.
on technology again, is those galactic corridors? Is that how warp travel works?
Like the Iserlohn and Fezon. Those are the two corridors, basically. How you can only travel through...
You can only warp travel through those, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
And it's okay. So just there's spots that are empty. That's easy to travel through.
Yeah, man, there's a supermassive black hole in the center. It
Oh,
literally
yeah,
is like a
that's right,
triangle. It like goes like a diamond shape. It goes from
Yeah.
like Imperial side to line side, and then it goes up and then down. Fezon's down here. Iserlohn's up here. But yeah, so yeah. Shenkop is like asking Yang, like you're putting a lot of trust into an exceptionally untrustworthy guy. You're an odd one. Are you sure about this? And Yang gives a pretty like cool speech about how he's doing it for peace, and he can't afford to like not trust him. Shenkop has like a really like hearty Santa-like laugh, calls him a naive moron, but says he's moved and agrees to help anyway.
Like that.
The plan basically goes off exactly as I demonstrated, but it's important to note like there's a little like bit here where there's like two commanders on Iserlohn, and they have like the Japanese like straight man, like funny man, like comedian
that
thing.
Oh, no.
The straight man and unfunny man.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. One of them controls the base itself, and one of them controls the fleet. The fleet commander is a guy who equates bravery with charging gloriously into death for no reason. It is an ideal held by a lot of the Highborns who think themselves noble and martyrs, who both Reinhardt and Yang strongly disagree with. They despise this mentality, would put all these people to death if they could. This is also where we are given the first glimpse of the most base character in the entire story, Paul von Oberstein, who we'll get to later.
Is that the mask?
It's Mr.
Or wait,
Forehead.
does Reinhardt wear a mask?
No one wears a mask in the show.
Oh, I'm thinking of a fucking Gundam character. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm thinking of Char.
I'm thinking of
Anyway, Oberstein is the staff officer to the fleet commander who coldly gives him advice on situation and correctly predicts everything. He first correctly states that the returning scout, which is the Rosenritter, is a trap, and they ignore his warning because a brave soldier always rescues his allies. I'm not going to take this cowardice from you,
That
von
kind of
Oberstein.
jawline, he couldn't possibly be a trap.
Yeah, exactly. Base. That's base, and it's funny they talk down on him because like Oberstein's like a lowborn like crippled retard. We'll talk about this later. So the entire fleet leave the station and the scout docks. They do exactly what Yang just described, and it goes perfectly. Yang's fleet docks while the other fleet is out there trying to intercept Yang's fleet, which is no longer there. And Yang sends they bloodlessly, without any casualties, take control of the station. They send all of the current Imperial soldiers on the station. They just say, like, you can just leave and go back to Odin. But Odin is the capital of the Empire, by the way. You just go back. No one will be mad at you. And they also send this message to the fleet commander, who is out there now. And Yang guarantees their safe passage and that no harm will come to them. Rather than be known as someone who has shamefully retreated, he announces that they will charge and attack Iserlohn, a plan which has no chance of escape because, reminder, they have a giant space laser that will destroy the entire fleet. Oberstein says this is foolish, says fuck it, and a scene that's like almost comically like. Have you guys seen MDE World Peace? Has everyone here seen MDE World Peace?
I've not.
Okay, well, there's a scene where like they break up with one of the main characters, and he just like walks over and like gets in a car and like rams it through the girl's house, and it basically looks exactly like that. Yeah. Basically, Oberstein fucks off in a really funny scene. He just like gets in a skate pod and like drives away. Yang tries to scare off the commander by only firing the big laser at a small portion of the ships, but this doesn't work, and they all die to the big space laser.
Like missed and hit them all?
No, sorry. So they fire the big laser the first time, and like a small portion of the ships try and like convince them one more time to surrender and just leave.
Yeah.
Not even surrender, just retreat. Just like literally you can go.
Get out.
Not even like you have to be our prisoner. Just like go away. But that doesn't work, and they still charge anyway. And then they finally fire the laser on like the brunt of the ships, and almost all of them die. Yang talks a lot about how disgusting this behavior is. By the way, this one noble sent literally 2 million people to die for his own bravery, because if they refused, they would all be held guilty of lèse majesty and executed themselves. Rather than return home with their lives, they decided to die honorably. And how outrageously fucked up this is. It's one of the only times Yang gets like visibly angry and like in the entire show. So after the loss of the fortress, the 3 Imperial chiefs of staff resign, and one of the vacancies is offered to Reinhardt. Reinhardt instead eloquently and cleverly employs the Kaiser to not dismiss any of the chiefs and urges lenience. It's worth noting that there's the Kaiser this time is actually kind of based in that he literally just doesn't give a fuck about anything. All he cares about is having sex with his consorts and growing his plants in his garden.
He just has the grill.
He actually, unironically, yeah, that's a good way. The Kaiser Friedrich is just a griller. That's all he does. He doesn't care about anything.
Is growing plants a pretty high class thing since you doing it on a ship?
a very beautiful.
Okay. Is he doing it on a ship?
No, he's on Odin. So they have an actual planetary giant castle. Basically.
Oh, I guess you told me plenty of planets besides Earth have habitable. Green life.
At this point, basically no one lives on Earth, and we'll get on.
Well, I know, but do a lot of people live on terrestrial-like planets?
Yeah, almost everyone lives on terrestrial planets.
So terraforming is the norm.
Yeah, that or there's just a lot. I mean, there's enough space that they discover enough of other planets.
Earth is not rare.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically the entire empire is truly run by this now this guy. I mean, he doesn't have the same physiognomy exactly as the caricature of the Happy Merchant, but he definitely has the mannerisms, right? He does he punches over, but he's a skinny little freak basically. His name is Lichtenlod. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but
could you spell that?
I assume you can guess how Lichten is spelled.
L-I-C-H.
Well, you can. Lick, like a lich, and then
okay, yeah.
And then Lichtenlad.
Lichtenlad.
Yeah, Lichtenlad. Lichtenlad is shocked by Reinhardt's behavior, and he. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so Lichtenlad basically controls the entire imperial affairs in terms of he's the minister of whatever. Basically.
The Dark Hand.
Yeah, he's the regent. He's the regent, and that's where he basically actually controls everything. He's not a bad guy, but he is just a self. In fact, this is one of the more obvious allusions to Chinese literature, but he very much has the court eunuch vibe from a lot of Chinese literature, the kind of scheming court eunuch. Although he's not a eunuch. Now Reinhardt doesn't do this for altruistic reasons. Obviously, he did it for one reason, because he wanted von Oberstein, who had come to him because they were about to execute him for retreating from the Battle of Eindhoven. I got a picture of the post.
What happened to your printed out pictures?
The printer alignment was bad, so I decided not to use them.
Okay.
Alright, so pass this around. This is
You
Von.
were afraid that this low-born retard would look even more low-born.
Yeah.
Now this is a noble brow if I've ever seen one.
Very wide.
My man is brow maxing.
It's a wide brow.
Look at mine, look at that.
It's bright as well.
Is it still playing music on that?
No.
I don't think.
Did you see it too, by the way?
Yeah, I saw it.
I would recognize that forehead anywhere.
Right. Yeah, you know who you watched some of it with me, so you know who Oberstein is.
Yeah.
So Oberstein is, in lack of a better term, he's our guy.
His best girl.
Yeah, basically.
You referred to him to me when you told me to watch the show.
Oberstein is basically like the most insane, like based autistic psychopath ever invented. But what makes him intriguing is that he's like a psychopath who legitimately and unironically cares about nothing else other than making society a better place and saving as many lives as he can. But he does this in the most like fucked up Machiavellian ways and makes everyone really mad. And because he suggests all these like really fucked up plans that are like objectively the correct way to do things, but are like horrific and dishonorable. He's like the Machiavellian voice of like evil calculation in Reinhardt's ear, and Reinhardt begrudgingly accepts him on his staff because
He's so good.
he's so good at what he like. There's even a scene where like he does something really, really, really fucked up suggestion later on in the story, and like Reinhardt's like, you know why I keep that man? It's because his points are so right they leave no room for debate, even if you despise him and are disgusted by him. He literally only smiles one time in the entire series.
This character has sold me on the show.
Yeah,
Make sure to
so
point
great.
it out when he does smile.
I will.
Okay.
You wrote it.
I have it in here, and I also have a clip that we're gonna play later too.
Okay,
by the way, so just so you can hear what his voice sounds like, because he has like a very distinct and like chilling kind of voice. It's very unsettling. So Oberstein has 2 cybernetic eyes. He was born blind, and the first thing he says when he meets Reinhardt is how he despises the Golden Bomb dynasty. If he had been born in Rudolph's time, he would have been killed immediately. And he basically like outright says "Lays Majesty" to Reinhardt, and Reinhardt like, oh no, you can't say that. And so he like arrests him, but then Oberstein convinces him to stay, and then they basically use the chief of staff not resigning to have the chief of staff sign off on transferring von Oberstein to Reinhardt. It's important to note that Oberstein is literally, actually, never once wrong in the entirety of the show. It's just a matter of whether or not they agree to use his plans or not. But he basically serves as one of Reinhardt's personal advisors, and eventually, well, we'll talk about this later, but he says stuff that no one else will say, and is notorious for not following formality and being plainly egalitarian. He doesn't trust others, but also doesn't think highly of himself either. And the only time that's ever shown his humanity is that he has a dog that he cares for extremely deeply, and it's a really funny scene. Wow. They don't show this in the anime; they only show this in the novels. But he had been like on his way to like work at like the CIA, essentially, the space CIA, and a guard's like, "Oh, I see you brought your dog with you today." Von Oberstein, and Over's like,
There's a dog.
and there's like a mangy mutt, like a fucking. It's even described as like a disgusting like mangy mutt that had been like following him like all the way for like the mile walk that Oberstein took, and Oberstein never realized, and he's just like sitting there like. Just like look, and Oberstein's like, "You think this dog belongs to me? You think it looks like my dog?" And the guard's like, and then Oberstein just like, whatever, and he just takes the dog upstairs, and from there on, the dog is treated like royalty and gets like the best treatment. He gets better treatment than Oberstein does.
So the
by
dog
himself.
doesn't eat dog food.
The dog does eat dog food. That's a famous scene we'll get to later. I'm glad you know that scene too. That's funny.
I only know it because of the fun things.
The K-on, yeah. Okay, so you guys, because remember Yang, he took Aizelon because he wanted the war to end. Now that they have a strategic foothold against the Empire, it'll make them hard for them to invade the Alliance. We can finally sue for peace. Psych! Y'all thought? The politicians need re-electing. We're not ending the war. We're making it even bigger now. So there's a scene where, like, the council starts speaking, and, like, 2 guys, one of them is described as, like, the dweebiest, like, like the caricatures of, like Hirohito from, like, World War II? They have, like the ho, and he's, like, got this super, like, big buck teeth. He basically looks like that. And then a guy's name, like, Loao Rebelo, which is, like, some Brazilian name or something. But basically, they just talk about how, like, the economy of the Alliance is in shambles, which it is, from like, and also the fact that we have like no manpower and like skilled labor because all of it goes to the military, and so like we're having constant blackouts and like lack of development. You know, our society's crumbling. But then like a bitch who looks and sounds like Hillary Clinton basically convinces all the other councilmen that like, well, I mean, we need reelected guys. So I mean, you know, we gotta, if we're fighting for freedom here, so we gotta do this. And they all decide to invade the Empire in a liberation campaign with more force than ever before. However, it's important to note, and this is that the only other, in the vote, the two councils I just described don't vote for the campaign. But one other person does. One other person, he didn't speak up the entire meeting, but votes against the campaign, and that's the Secretary of Defense, Job Trudell. So yeah, they decide to invade. The plan is drafted by some like know-it-all, arrogant freak named Andrew Fork. Yang goes and talks to the oldest and wisest commander in the Alliance named Bucock, I believe is how they pronounce it. And like some other guy, and they're on like a big scene in like the war room. They all him and Bucock protest and express the issues of the invasion because it's ridiculous and stupid, but there's no avail. Yang starts talking. Like I said, Yang's like, but what about the supply lines? Won't we be threatened? How we'll overstretch? And the Fork's like, you know, you're speaking really cowardly for a supposed hero, Yang, and they just like try to shut him down by like not actually addressing the points. And lo and behold, as soon as they hear about this invasion plan, Oberstein walks up to Reinhardt and says, I have the plan. And the plan is even worse than what Yang predicted, and that Oberstein has all of the Imperial forces go to all of the planets nearby Iserlon, take all of their food and granary supplies, and then leave. So as soon as the Alliance show up, they're like, we're here to liberate you from the freedom of the Empire. Like, yeah, that's cool. Before freedom, can we have food? And so the Alliance is now like forced to spend like billions of dollars like feeding all these like starving peasants. And like they can't afford to not do it because it'll like look bad if they don't, because that's like their whole point. So now like their supply lines are overstretched. They're like totally like they have no more. They're running out of food. Like everything's really bad. And then eventually, there's again, lo and behold, there's an attack on a big supply convoy, and there's basically no more food that they can send to the people in the Empire. So the Alliance ships plunder the fucking Imperial planets and leave back into Alliance space. Yang tries to get the brass to finally organize a retreat. They refuse on the grounds that the enemy has yet to be engaged with, which is true, for the record.
It's like the enemy in this case being the giant fortress.
The enemy in this case being the Empire. They haven't actually had a battle with the Empire yet. They've just been massively defeated by food, basically. Yeah. They don't do this. Reinhardt then leads.
They raided like Imperial like planets. Yeah.
So they went to the Imperial planets. It's like, hey, we're here to liberate you. Give them their food, and then their supply convoy was shut off. Now the Alliance has no food. So they then re-rob the food back and leave.
Oh my god!
And while also taking more than they had given too. But what little they had, they even show like, we know you're hiding bread in here, and they murder a bunch of people.
I thought you said Oberstein was never wrong.
I mean, Oberstein's like, I have a plan to get rid of the Alliance without shedding a single drop of Imperial blood.
Yeah,
okay.
And then he does.
I just lost what the plan was. My bad.
Yeah, the plan was exactly what Oberstein just did, which is to remove all the food.
It's torture Earth.
Yes. No bloodshed. Yep. Pretty good.
So anyway, Reinhardt leads a surprise attack here, and once again, almost every single fleet dies except for Yang's and also Bucock's, because Yang organizes a successful retreat. I'm not going to go into it, but if you really care, it's very cool to watch the anime. The campaign ends in a total disaster. The Alliance fleets are completely crippled. They have almost no military strength, and Yang is once again the PR hero because he succeeded in the retreat. He's the hero of Iserlon Fortress, and he's now the commander of Iserlon Fortress and an admiral. They don't talk about the fact that the Alliance is basically completely fucked now. Now, Reinhard, after this, offers a POW exchange as ostensibly a display of magnanimity. Now, both Reinhard knows that Yang knows that this is a trap, but Reinhard also knows that Yang can't refuse, and so Yang does it.
Okay, this is some Death Note shit.
Yeah, man, that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Reinhard knows that Yang knows it's a trap, but Reinhard also knows that Yang knows that he can't refuse.
Correct.
So Yang accepts.
Correct.
Why? Okay.
Because, imagine what it would look like to be like, we're not going to take all of our POWs for free with no consequences.
Right.
And what does the Empire get out of it by getting POWs?
They get all their POWs, but we'll also... I'll just explain it now.
All right.
Basically, the reason he did this is because Reinhard... The embers of civil war are brewing inside of the Empire. And Reinhard knows this, and wants to use this as his chance to finally assume power inside of the Empire. But to do this, he wants to make sure that the Alliance is not going to invade during this time. So he sends a bunch of sleeper agents in with the POWs to stir up trouble inside of the Alliance. And Yang predicts all this, and they actually, he sends, a whole missive to Bukok back on Heinesen and a bunch of other stuff, but yeah.
You said it was a POW exchange? Did they get any POWs back?
Yeah, so, but besides, the 12 sleeper agents, there's also, 2 million on each side that are, real POWs that they send back, basically.
Alliance doesn't do the same thing. They don't,
Alliance, it's an exchange. Alliance sends back 2 million.
Yeah, I know, but they don't do any sleeper agents?
No,
You can steal
they
my
don't.
glass.
Yeah.
Go ahead, take it.
Sorry, so at this point, Kirkais and Yang meet to facilitate the prisoner exchange. That's Kirkais again by the red guy. They have a cool scene where they discuss how glad they are to be. Everyone in the Empire really loves Yang because he's the only Alliance commander that doesn't suck complete ass, and they really respect him. And they always oh, I wish you were on our side. We could have won the war. And Yang's always yeah, I wish I was too. I could be napping right now. There's multiple scenes where he says basically exactly this. So I explain the agent. Bukok is promoted to the head of the Alliance military. Yang predicts exactly what will happen with the sleeper agent and writes a missive exactly planning what to do in the event of a coup. And lo and behold, there is a coup. The military, being some members of the military, start a coup called the National Military Salvation Council. Oh, I forgot to mention, right, the battle where everyone almost died was the Battle of Amritsar, basically. That was over here. That's October 15th, 3596.
IC or?
CE.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'm using the real, our time. Yeah. It's 3597. AD.
CE.
But yeah, it's the non-religious version or whatever. Because no one has religion anymore.
No wonder.
So the coup, it's this typical military coup. We got to restore freedom by removing all the freedom. It doesn't really make any sense. The main big thing is that the head of the coup is Frederica Greenhill's dad, Admiral Greenhill, which and everyone expects Yang to arrest Frederica, but he doesn't, and it's a big deal because he trusts her enough. It doesn't really go very well. Very quickly, Jessica Edwards, this is the bitch I mentioned earlier who Yang had one-itis for, leads a counter-protest at the Astrodome, basically.
Astrodome.
The Heinesen Astrodome.
The Dimmadome.
The Dimsdale, the Heinesen Dimmadome. There's a big massacre where the military open fires in the crowd, code
Nothing
chaos.
happened at the Dimmadome.
Yeah, and thousands of people die being shot by civilians. And then,
Okay, this is a random tangent, but I just want to interject. I didn't know until very recently that. So the pictures of Tiananmen Square with the kid standing in front of the 3 tanks. I had always thought that what happens in that video is the kid gets run over. I never saw the actual video until 2 weeks ago. I've just only ever seen the image.
Wait, so what does happen?
He just like climbs up on the tank, and I don't think they run him over in that video. I know a bunch of people died there that day.
I don't think like there's like 3 tanks. They stop. They don't move.
And the kid is
What
like
will
sits
happen at the
down.
end?
Yeah.
He just like climbs up on the tank and then it ends. I don't know if there's like a longer version, but I
Probably
had
come out of the tank. And,
never actually. Well, yeah, I know they killed Steve.
I
but
can
I don't
see
think
real
they-
beer.
I don't think they ran him over the tank. I was literally always under the impression
I just want to refill it over and over again.
the other day.
I can't say I've ever heard that specifically, but I just always unconsciously thought that's what happened.
Yeah, that they fucking just ran over a bunch of students with tanks. I don't know.
Like I said, so this
No, they
Sorry.
ran over one student with a tank.
They ran over the two slow moving tanks.
And that's why we hate China.
Wait, didn't run over anyone with tanks. You guys
Oh yeah.
You're right. Nothing happened in 1989.
Can you come here, brownie? Oh my god, there's no fucking brownie left. You guys fucking ate it all.
We were saving these two for you.
Okay, thank you.
You could have these 2 brownies. Nobody eat any more
I
brownies.
have grocery store cookies.
Oh,
Nobody-
fuck yeah. I
Literally
can't wait to have
nobody
some
eat any
corn
more
syrup,
brownies.
bro.
This man deserves another brownie.
Okay, so the coup is not going well. Yang has to go back and put it down. Now, Heineken is protected by a system of war satellites called the Artemis necklace.
I can't hear you through your brownie.
The Armolo Regula, who said?
The Artemis necklace.
Now, the Artemis necklace,
Optimist brownie.
Yang thinks this is stupid and gay. He hates it. And he talks about in the novel, he doesn't talk about the anime, he talks about in the novel how he thinks it's so ostentatious that he decides to destroy it as ostentatiously as possible by getting balls of ice and like pushing them towards the satellites at really high speeds, and they like blow up. Now this has destroyed all of Heineken's defenses in order for him to get in there and clear the riot, which will soon prove to be a bad decision, but a necessary one, unfortunately. So during this time, the Kaiser has died. There is now a succession crisis as he had no suitable heirs.
Dude, I'm so glad he died before he had to do anything.
Yeah.
He really just got to live.
Wait, who's
Great
going to
life.
take care of his plants now?
Who's
And then
gonna
actually, like a couple days before he dies, Lichtenlad is discussing Reinhardt with the Kaiser. He's like, hey, maybe the Golden Bomb Dynasty should end, Maybe maybe it's
Kaiser
better.
said
Maybe it's better if it does, I mean, am I really that good of a leader? I mean, let's be honest here. And he basically says something to that extent. And then a few days later, lo and behold, the Civil War happened. So Lichtenlad and Reinhardt form a sort of enemy of my enemy alliance because Lichtenlad controls all the political power but has no military force, and Reinhardt is the opposite. So they basically help each other to fight off the other faction, which is the High Nobles, which are led by Duke Braunschweig, who I mentioned earlier. He has like the dumbest haircut I've ever seen. I didn't take a picture of him, but trust me when I say it's really stupid. Over the protests of them, a 5-year-old named Erwin Joseph III is put on the throne, which essentially just means he's a puppet for Lichtenlad because he's controlled by a regent. They revolt and retreat to Geiersburg Fortress, which is an imperial space, which is a older, smaller version of Iserlohn Fortress, basically, for lack of a better term. These guys are led by an imperial admiral named Admiral Merkatz, who is like, and this also feels like a kind of Chinese literary trope where he's like the old codger, like stuck in his way, like no nonsense kind of guy. He doesn't really like attack he doesn't really like support the nobles because he like believes strongly in their cause, but because like that's just what he knows, and he doesn't know any better, and he just goes along with the easiest path for him, basically. He demands that he gets complete military control, and the Duke agrees. However, this soon proves that the Duke is way too arrogant and never actually gives him full military control. And the nobles also don't listen to him, and this will prove to be their downfall more than anything else. So now we're going to explain, now I'm finally going to explain the most important of Reinhardt's subordinates. His hair.
Not the red-haired guy?
It's not the red, well, the other,
Overseen?
the other subordinates, sorry, that I haven't talked about yet. Alright, so this is Oscar von Reuenthal.
Damn.
He is. If you
Got
guys
some
know,
intense eyes.
if you know who Norio Wakamoto is, he voiced the king in Code Geass.
And the cat.
Yeah, and the cat in Azumagadayo too. He has a very, very commandingly powerful voice. This is actually his first big role too. His character is that he's a fucking stone cold badass. He has like weird, fucked up relationships with like BPD schizo girls that he discards and that regularly try to kill him, and then he just kills them instead.
Jesus.
He explains this away because he states that he's cursed by women. So he was born with heterochromia, and his mom was having an affair when he was born, and the other man's eye color was one of the other eye colors that Royenthal had. So I actually wrote in here, will say something about microchimerism. And so she thought she had microchimerism, attempted to gouge out the other eye, and was stopped at the last moment, and then she commits suicide. And because of this, he believes that he is cursed by women and is a base misogynist. His character arc is based in almost like one-for-one with Tristan from Wagner's Tristan and Isolde. If you know the details of that opera, you will know exactly how Royenthal's character will go down. His battleship is called the Tristan too, unsurprisingly.
Does music from Tristan und Isolde
Yes.
play during
His most
yes.
important scene? Yes,
Fantastic.
Tristan and Isolde plays. Although I don't believe they have like the vocals. It's just like instrumental stuff. Okay, so then there's Mittermeier. Now in this picture, you can actually see him
Mittermeier.
hanging out with Royenthal. They're best friends.
Still recording. And how
Wait
long has it
until
been?
his
Like 2
epic
hours?
moment.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I just want to see if it's.
Just make sure it's still recording. Well, my computer didn't turn on, obviously.
It's still got battery. It's still go good. But yeah, so this is Mittermeier. You can see him having drinks with Royenthal. They're best friends. They're called the twin something of the Empire. They're like the two best admirals besides Reinhardt, basically.
If we're going
drinking
Chinese-
the delicious German whiskey.
The
Yeah.
twin star, the twin
Yeah, the
dragon.
twin stars or the twin dragons.
It's I actually think it might be twin dragons. That sounds right. Something like that.
Good chicken.
Good
Good call.
Drachen.
But yeah, Royenthal will be more important later, but we're going to talk about Mittermeier. So Mittermeier is known as the Gale Wolf. He's known for lightning-fast tactics. He is a very, plain sort of guy, both in appearance and, demeanor. He's professional class by birth, described as having, an honest, farmer-like demeanor. He's also a cunny poster. He marries some 13-year-old girl when he's 22, who's an orphan distant relative of his. This is portrayed. I actually wrote, this is portrayed in a Lindy sense, not a groomer sense. And they barely talk to each other before the proposal. And he proposes without a date or anything. Him and his wife are unable to conceive, and people talk shit about him behind his back because of that. And
Well, it's only because she's too young.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Him and Royenthal are referred to as the twin pillars of the Reinhardt.
Same thing.
Essentially, the second and third in command. I forget which one is second.
Your
But,
name shall be Usul.
well, I guess, sorry, the third and fourth in command. Because of Kirkai, sorry.
What's your secret name? Which only I will know. Is
Wadu.
Yusul.
So Royenthal and Mittermeier are both extremely loyal to Reinhardt. There's also, there's three other, well, there's a couple other guys I'm talking about. I didn't get pictures of them because they're not that important, but one of them is Bittenfeld. It's because Japanese, weird with those, so they don't really specify. But he's the stupid based Zerg rusher guy. That's his thing. He commands the Black Lancers, and he's really, he is the first to get mad and be very, he's very outspoken and the rush tactic guy. Then there's Mecklinger, who has how do I describe this haircut, man? It kind of like a Kurt Cobain haircut with a Charlie Chaplin mustache. It's really weird. He looks very like stupidly refined in like a very German kind of way. Mecklinger is referred to.
Mecklinger is a very German name.
He's referred to as the artist admiral. He ends up writing the biography of Reinhard after, Reinhard's whole escapades. It's noted that he has written 5 operas and painted like 20 paintings. He's also a very good admiral. He's an artist. He likes to go to the opera, whatever.
It's the very model of a modern major general.
Yes.
The only other big one I'm gonna talk about, is like Muller, which is like he looks very boring, standard looking too, and he's known as like the Iron Wall because he's very good at like defensive tactics. There's also one guy who never speaks. His name is the Silent Commander Eisenach. He literally does not talk, even though he can.
Does he look more or less imposing than the dude who's cursed by women?
What about the dude who's literally named Iron Wall?
Iron Wall looks like a pussy. In fact, aside from Kirkheis, he's probably the most twinky commander in Reinhardt's commanders.
How many commanders does he have?
Like, direct admiral.
It's not 12, right?
It's about 12.
Dude. Just.
And then, like, other various posts, he has, like, a top.
Dude, could you explain?
He has 12 disciples, essentially.
Oh, okay. I thought this was a Chinese literature reference.
No, it's, I mean, they already have a character named Job. I think there's some biblical overtures here.
Okay, so.
They could have just been picking randomly.
How likely is someone to land on the number 12 when they pick randomly?
I don't actually know why I decided to talk about them here, just because they're not important until it happens. Okay. But I decided to talk about them here. So basically,
it's on these notes here. I gotta talk.
So
someone wrote it on this paper.
There's during the Civil War, one of Duke Braunschweig's planets rises up in revolt, called Westerland. Duke Braunschweig is really butthurt about this. He's like, I'm gonna nuke Westerland, and his aides are like, isn't that your own planet? Why are you going to kill all of your people? And Braunschweig's like, I don't care about my people. Fuck, I'm nuking the planet. Reinhardt intercepts this and is about to go and save the planet when von Oberstein stops him and says, wait a minute. Rather than do that, why don't you just broadcast the nuke to the rest of the Empire and let him nuke the planet? Which will reduce morale in the nobles' forces, draw public support for you, and vilify the nobles completely, and they will never recover.
Our God.
So,
Our God.
now this is where the OVA and the novels differ.
Oh no.
In the anime, Reinhardt refuses this request,
Cringe!
but Oberstein does it behind his back anyway. In the novels, Reinhardt accepts the request.
I'm assuming we're considering the novels canon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does the anime go out of its way a lot to make Reinhardt seem less?
That's in fact actually the only notable difference between
so
the main and the main.
probably just because it was specifically a nuke.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
There's like we don't want to see
In general,
Two wasn't enough. We should have normalized that.
Overall, the adaptation of Legendary Heroes is extremely faithful. So anyway, this strategy does work. The nobles start to infight. There's a lot of other shit.
Oh, you're using atomics.
Yeah. There's an internal rebellion inside of the conspiracy, and eventually it all gets put down. Braunschweig is forced to commit suicide by his other nobles, etc., etc.
Is it by cyanide pill?
Yeah, or do they like
They
inject themselves
like
into space?
wine with like poison wine.
Oh, okay.
They like actually they grab his throat on his throne. They like grab him by the throat on his throne and like fucking dump it down his throat. He was like,
Does he die on his throne?
So
Yeah,
it's
he
a
does, yeah.
sophisticated Greek method of
Yeah,
but then they do it a German way.
Because they're like, he's like, wait a minute, I don't want to die, and they're like, you need to take responsibility for this, and they fucking like grab him by the throat.
Jesus.
It's really basic.
That's pretty basic.
So then after this, there's a big scene where like Reinhard goes through all of the people involved in the conspiracy and decides whether to pardon or execute them, basically. He ends up either pardoning or recruiting most of them. and executing only a few. However, one of them, the main aide to Braunschweig, comes in with Braunschweig's corpse and like a space coffin, basically. It's like a
Like a
sci-fi
normal
coffin.
coffin, except in
Floats
space.
like-
It has like glass and it's got like space
Oh, that's
metal on it.
very dramatic.
Yeah.
That is very dramatic.
And he entreaties himself before Reinhard, but this was a trick. He opens the coffin of Braunschweig and retrieves a laser pistol and intends to shoot Reinhard. Kierkeis jumps in front of the fucking shot, and Kierkeis fucking dies on the throne room in front of Reinhard's, like on his feet, blood in the middle.
I
of it.
distinctly. This is one of the few scenes that I distinctly remember.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
And then von Oberstein and Royenthal both beat the shit out of the guy and ruthlessly, brutally fuck him up and then they execute him later. But anyway, Reinhard does not take this very well at all.
Is this what he?
He is extremely down bad
Kierkeis is
after
the
this because Kierkeis is his best friend.
The red-haired guy, right?
Yeah, the red-haired guy. He was his
Make
best
sure I
friend.
remember the name.
And in fact, he has a really gay, emotional why did you I'm not gonna do it justice, but
Is this when he becomes Alucard?
yeah, this is when he becomes a little punished. So it's not so subtly implied by the story that if Kierkeis had never died, Reinhardt's character would end up being much different than the one it turned out to be. He ends up taking hair from Kierkeis and putting it in a golden locket with Anna Rose's picture on it. And he whenever he's nervous, he clutches it and looks at it to reassure himself. It's really weird.
Extremely bizarre.
Yeah.
They were really good friends.
Literally, before Kierkeis' body is even out of the room, Oberstein's hey, why don't we use this as pretext to overthrow Lichtenlad instead? Giving Reinhard no attempts.
He never sleeps. This
yeah, he never misses. And they do this. They land on Odin, take the Imperial Seal, force Lichtenlad into suicide, and they make a big point about how Reinhard doesn't kill Lichtenlad's family, because he's not doing that anymore. He thinks it's gay and cringe. Also, there's a funny scene where Royenthal's talking to Reinhard, and he's like, "Oh man, that was a good revolt we just did. Now we're in charge of the Empire." And it's yeah, I love revolting. By the way, Royenthal, if you think you can win, revolt against me at any time. I'll welcome the challenge. This will prove to be a bad decision later in the series. Anna Rose also withdraws into seclusion permanently. Once she learns that Kierkeis had died, she's never the same, and Reinhard is really torn up about it because he did most of this to free his sister, and now his sister wants nothing to do with him. Okay, so, but briefly I'm gonna bring up one other character real quick. The only character I have a thing for, I think. This bitch right here, Hildegard von Mariendorf.
Mario door.
Hildegard is sort of when you think of the perfect charming, banter-filled court lady who's the ideal of a queen that is educated and can banter but isn't pretending to be a man on the throne. You know what I'm saying, right?
Hilda's a base name.
Hildegard is a very based character and one of the better characters in the series in
I'll
general.
name my daughter Hildegard. My firstborn.
Hildegard had gone to Reinhard privately before and basically negotiated a truce with certain members of the nobility in exchange for siding with Reinhard. And then after that, she becomes Reinhard's new advisor now that Kierkeis especially is dead. And she gives a lot of good advice and it essentially fulfills the I don't want to say emotional, but
emotional.
the side of things that Reinhard would not see, basically.
The compassion.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Is it essentially his conscience?
Yeah, kinda, to a certain extent. But also just being the the guy speaking in his ear that disagrees with him that isn't Oberstein, basically. In a very different way than Oberstein. Also during this time, like a schizo count and some other guy like abduct the young Kaiser, Erwin Josef, and they go to the Alliance. And the Alliance just like, yeah, you can establish a government in exile. What could possibly go wrong? Also, Meerkats defects to Iserlohn and allies himself with Yang specifically.
Hiding himself in this little shithole.
Yeah. so now that Reinhardt's in charge, he starts doing the conqueror things. He starts doing all the cool the like reforms that needed to happen. He confiscates and nationalizes all the wealth of the defeated nobles and establishes UBI. He abolishes serfdom in the class system. He does not allow free speech, but he allows freer speech with more civil liberties, and you get more rights in criminal justice reform, etc.
Right, so he builds back better.
Yeah.
All right.
He does the Green New Deal. And then Reinhardt is also, at this point, starting to slip into punished mode.
Is this where exactly does the hair take place? Is it a time skip?
The what? Sorry.
It takes a while to grow hair.
What's it? That's surely a thing. It's too close to my number. It's definitely a scan color.
Where are we at on the timeline now?
Oh yeah.
I don't know what time is it.
I mean,
where are we on the
timeline? We are right here.
I don't know what time.
Okay.
Well, actually, at this point, we're like right here, basically, like November 3597.
I've just only seen pictures of Reinhardt short-haired or long-haired. So do they just cut scenes and he has long hair?
So over time, his hair grows out longer after Kierkeis dies, and eventually to the point where it's like
he just stops cutting it.
Yeah, he just stops cutting it eventually.
And becomes punished.
He becomes punished.
Looks like Alucard.
Okay, so after this, we're going back to the Alliance now. Rather than gratitude for saving the Alliance government suspects Yang of harboring ambitions to be like Reinhardt and overthrow the government because he destroyed the only defense of Anheinesen and landed a fleet on the capital planet. Needless to say, this is stupid because he could have done this at literally any time when he mopped up the coup, but he didn't. They trapped him in this extra legal tribunal for a month straight of 12-hour inquiry hearings. Frederica tries to get him out with, I'm going to mention him because his name is funny. His name is Mashengo, and he looks like a black racist caricature with giant red lips. But yeah, they try to go up and get him out, and the CIA basically laugh in her face. And when she says I'm going to the media, and they literally just burst out laughing in front of her.
What does Mashenko do?
Nothing. I mean, he's just there.
Look, I have a black man. Free.
Yeah. Aren't you scared? That's basically the only reason he's there.
Okay.
Because he's big and black. Mandingo.
Oh no.
Yang is finally about to actually resign. He's finally about to resign for real when they get big news. Iserlohn Fortress is under attack. This is because they
Under siege.
Yeah, Ram Ranch is under siege, under lockdown. And this is because they accepted the little 5-year-old Kaiser's government in exile. This was used as the casus belli for Reinhardt to now invade the Alliance again. They immediately release him, but they're wagging their finger at him as they do it. And he returns with 5,000 more ships. By the way, it's revealed in this time that during the entire coup, Job Trunic was hiding out with the terrorist cult the entire time.
Terra as in earth.
So yeah, I'm going to explain the terrorist. So the terrorist cult are a bunch of religious cultists associated with Fazan
Finally, a religion.
and Job Trunic
Finally,
that are
Fazan.
essentially they just worship the earth. They have their bishops dress like evil Cobra commanders. They look ridiculous. They're evil schemers. They have a base underneath Mount Everest, which is the
biggest trope ever.
The biggest it's like Superman's fortress in Antarctica. Basically,
Yeah.
it's the stupidest shit
In
ever.
40K, that's where the Emperor is.
That's funny as fuck.
Is under the Himalayas is on Terra.
Okay,
Wow.
it's confirmed that this is influenced by 40K then.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so their cult is they want to go to Earth and live there. That's it. They worship the Earth.
Still blast, right? Okay, sorry, you'll probably get there.
I mean, it's like getting better, but yeah, I mean, it's basically
Just obsessed with Earth.
yeah, they're obsessed with
Just
Earth.
little blades of
And the Fazani like are loosely associated with them in the the intrigue level. And most of the ships that go back to Earth are Fazani merchant ships carrying pilgrims.
So the religion that they have, are they like, do they show much of it? I'm just curious, like, what are they worshiping? Just the idea of Earth?
They never really talk about it.
Okay, so it's just a backdrop.
It's just yeah. The more important part is that they're like an evil cult, basically.
Evil cult.
They're an evil
Not
cult.
from Earth, but want to go there.
Yeah. Also, Job Trunick is now the Prime Minister of the Alliance because he is the only chairman still alive that opposed the vote against the war with the Empire, if you remember back, because he knew that it would be a disaster. And he even says, like, just because I was the Secretary of Defense doesn't mean that I agree with all decisions. And this goes to show Job Trunick is unironically actually smart. He's just also a complete piece of shit. So Yang gets back to Iserlohn, and what he finds is that Reinhard went to his scientists and said, "All right, I have a plan to defeat Iserlohn. What if we took Geiersburg Fortress and pushed it somewhere else?" And they push it in front of Iserlohn Fortress. They literally attach a bunch of warp drives to it and just like stick it across from Iserlohn. And have them like fire their laser cannons at each other over and over again.
Jesus
It's not really working.
So it's a Death Star versus a slightly smaller Death Star.
Yeah, basically.
The first Death Star versus the second Death Star.
And in fact, the only reason that Iserlohn hadn't been attacked further is because all the commanders on the Imperial side thought it was like a trick because Yang was the commander, even though he was just not there, and that was the reason they were acting so defensively. Yeah, basically. And once they realize he's actually there, they try to attack more. It doesn't work. Can you refill me too while you're doing that? So they give up and they basically try to like ram the Geiersburg Fortress into Iserlohn, which also does not work. One of Reinhardt's generals dies, and this is where Muller gets the nickname Iron Wall because he like defends Reinhardt from something basically. No wait. Okay, I think I got out of order. The abduction of the Kaiser was after this, I guess. I don't remember. It doesn't matter.
So how'd the war start?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's not important. It's probably just an extension of the original war. Whatever. Anyway, a bunch of there's some time. So yeah, that was the 8th Battle of Iserlohn right here.
Went to the Battle of Ideon.
And then after that, then there's the 9th Battle of Iserlohn, like 5 months later. Royenthal leads a huge. I'll wait.
I see a 10th.
And an 11th.
I don't see the 11th yet, but okay.
That's towards the end,
Oh yeah, no, I don't.
Gotcha.
The Battle of Iserlohn to end all battles of Iserlohn.
Oh, it's a Sharpie.
Does Job Trunick have a wife?
I don't think so.
Okay. Do you know the biblical character
Actually, no,
Job?
he does. I remember this because they talk about how he abandons all of them.
Okay, so do you know the biblical character Job?
No.
That's
Yeah,
the
of
dude
course.
who. Okay.
Yeah.
That's very appropriate then. That's funny.
Sorry.
So
Okay.
if there's the one dude referencing the Tristan and Isolde, I don't. That's a play, right?
It's an opera.
It's an opera. Okay. Is there? Well, there's a lot of operatic music. Are they like referencing that? Is everyone like, I'm gonna go listen to some Beethoven?
No, but this
I mean-
music plays during like all the fight scenes and stuff.
So it's implied that a lot of that cultural stuff did survive. Then?
Yeah, well,
No, it's more like
I don't know. I think it's more just like our cultural backdrop for like us, the viewers.
So Tristan and Isolde is just a bit of a wall break that we're not supposed to pay too much attention to.
Yeah,
then?
the Tristan Soul part is more just like for Royenthal's character.
Okay.
But the literal events of the opera are basically Royenthal's entire character.
So that's okay. So it's just a haha reference.
Okay, so anyway, 5 months pass, and then they attack Iserlohn again. Royenthal leads a huge fleet to siege it, and request reinforcements from the capital due to a deadlock. However, this is a trick, because Reinhard had a new plan to finally invade the Alliance, and he did something unthinkable.
The supply lines.
He just says, why don't we just
Go around.
invade Fazan and take it? What are they going to do? They have no military. They're our subject, aren't they? Technically. They're ours now. And so he just walks through Fazan and enters Alliance space. And everyone's like, how did he do that?
How many
It's
years has it been
unthinkable,
since
yeah.
anyone has tried this?
Like at least 400.
400, okay.
That's some Chinese shit.
But yeah, he properly occupies it. No one expected this. And then Yang has to decide what to do to either defend Alliance space or keep the fortress. And he decides to abandon the fortress and try and defend Alliance territory. But he installs a, like... This is how they describe it. He installs a backdoor on the Izerlon computer, which he also disguises by a second trick, which is setting up time bombs around the facility to disguise the backdoor.
Now, we haven't really talked much about computing technology. What level of technology is there in terms
He
of...
didn't have a degree in it. Sure, that's for
It's
sure.
very, like... That's a good question. So there's not, like... At least, like, in the story, there's never mentioned any, like pocket devices. There's nothing like a cell phone or, like, social media.
Yeah.
But there is, like, video calls
So
and, like,
it's sort of like how a person in, like, the 1970s would imagine computer
Basically,
technology
yeah.
would evolve. It's not like our computers, but it's also not like they had a Butlerian jihad.
Yeah, basically.
And no AIs at all.
It's like a
There are no AIs.
concept.
It's also important to note that communication, like, locally being, like, within a couple planets of each other is, like, instant. But, like, communication, like, across the galaxy is, like, not instant. You have to send messengers.
Okay.
But yeah, so anyway, Bukok defends in a huge battle, and Yang arrives in time to save some of Bukok's fleet, which is the Battle of Rantamaria. Bukok does the best he can with, like, his limited fleet, but they're significantly outnumbered, and they try their best. Yang becomes a fleet admiral after this. Yang is given basically full control of the military at this point. He has a new plan for dealing with the Imperial invasion, which basically means luring Reinhard out into open battle and killing him, because Reinhard has not married and has no heirs. Now that he controls the dynasty, if he were to die, it would dissolve into infighting, and there would be a power struggle. And you're never going to guess what Yang starts to do immediately. That's
Drink.
right. He raids their supply convoys. He starts doing, like...
Does he drink at the same time?
He also does drink.
Good.
He's just a general nuisance. He starts fucking with them, like, doing stupid, like, guerrilla raids, destroying their supply convoys, etc., etc. And this is done as a bait to get Reinhard to come out personally. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention this, but Royenthal does recapture Izerlon here.
Okay.
But they don't detect the
I
back door
imagine
because
that's not important.
it's not really that important, but it's important that, like, they didn't detect the back door because they were too busy dealing with the time bombs that Yang installed, and they didn't think to check the computers. Basically, it's
Okay.
like
For the back door.
yeah, I don't know. It's stupid. Whatever. It's not important.
Just look at the back of it. Like, what's so hard?
Reinhard does come out to fight, and Reinhard does that, like, the obvious tactic, which is, I have more people than you. I'm going to send all of them at once, and you will lose. And Yang understands that Reinhard's trying to wear him down, but he can do nothing else, otherwise Heinesen will fall. Oh, by the way, Yulian is now on the ship with Yang.
Boys are back in town.
Okay, so the Battle of Vermilion gets... I have wrote retardedly high IQ. So Reinhard sends out, like, waves of thin screens of ships to wear Yang down. This is working, so Yang retreats into an asteroid belt with a supply base on it, and Imperials are scared of a trap, so they don't enter.
Very Chinese.
After a while, 10,000 ships depart port side of the Imperial fleet. 10,000 Alliance ships depart port side of the Imperial fleet. Reinhard realizes that this is a double bait maneuver, that Yang is trying to disguise his actual main force as a decoy and flee, and sends the bulk of the fleet to engage. However, this was a triple reverse bait, because in fact, it was actually just a decoy. They were construction ships tied to asteroids, and they had nothing.
So was Oberstein sitting by Reinhardt's side saying, "No, it's a triple
Yeah.
trap"?
Yang then attacks from behind, which makes no sense because they're in space, but he attacks them from behind, and then also the unmanned construction ships that he had sent as a decoy ram into the other ships, basically.
Some greenskin shit.
Yeah, and then it ends up being a disguised encirclement by Yang, and Yang has now neutralized almost all of the Imperial fleet, and Reinhardt is being close to being personally attacked on his flagship, and they actually end up putting the they get the ship right under Reinhardt's battleship, so that they can't fire upon it because they'll hit Reinhardt. So the battle comes to a standstill while they're doing hand-to-hand fighting inside of Reinhardt's ship. Reinhardt is about to be evacuated when Muller, who they had sent to, because but at this time Reinhardt sent all of his sub-commanders to invade Alliance space. Muller has arrived back at the main fleet because he accomplished his invasion faster than expected. Because he was supposed to get a supply depot under control, and the commander just surrendered rather than fighting. And so Muller's all right, cool, I'm done. And he went back. So Muller puts up an insane defense and managed to keep Yang at bay a little bit longer. And then, this is when they get underneath Reinhardt's ship. When they get underneath their ship, Reinhardt does the anime thing where they zoom out on his face with the wide fisheye lens, and he's like the damaged fucking part. However, Hildegard had secretly enlisted Royenthal and Mittermeier to occupy Heinessen behind Reinhardt's back and force Yang to surrender by capitulating. Hildegard had suggested this earlier to Reinhardt, but Reinhardt insisted that he wanted to beat Yang in open battle.
Now, was Oberstein aware of this?
No.
Okay.
Now, literally, with Reinhardt's head in sight, he could kill him and win at any moment. Yang gets the order to surrender from the Alliance because Heinessen is now captured. And against the objection of literally everyone in Yang's fleet, Yang does so. He actually surrenders and gives up, even though he could have killed Reinhardt right there.
The duality of man, even the most based man, can be cringe sometimes.
And this is because Yang, unironically, legitimately believes in democracy, for better and for worse. And he does this because he doesn't want to set a precedent for future generations of military command overruling civilian oversight.
This man studied history and came to believe in democracy.
I don't know. I don't get it either, but that's what he does. Anyway,
It's a legend for a reason.
Yeah. Reinhardt is left humbled, bitter, and nervous as his victory was gained not by himself, but by the act of his subordinates, and most importantly, a woman. And this was the first and only...
And so he grows his hair out to imitate.
Yeah. This is the first and only real tactical defeat of Reinhardt's entire life. Reinhardt only gets more sordid after this. He's visibly conflicted, letting himself go, clutching at the locket. And you can tell he's shaken and no longer trusts himself or others. Finally, a couple days pass, and then Yang boards the Brunhild to have a face-to-face surrender chat with Reinhardt.
Is this the first time that they've met?
Correct. In person, this is the first time they met, and I actually got the dialogue because I thought it was good, and I wanted to talk about it. But first, he arrives, and basically everyone on the Imperial's fleet is extremely disappointed by how he looks. They all think he looks like a weirdo. Muller, this is where Muller remarks that if Yang had been born in the Empire, he would have liked to study tactics under him. Yang responds that he too wished Muller had been born in his side of the galaxy, because if so, he'd be taking a nap right now. Reinhardt tries to convince Yang to serve under him, Yang refuses because he believes in democracy and refuses to serve the Empire. But he remarks this in a way that's very interesting, that that he grew up drinking different water than those of the Empire, and that if he had been born in the Empire, he would have volunteered to serve for Reinhard. But because he did it, there's no way that he could reasonably choose to serve under him. And this is like one of the scenes where, like, you know, they, like the classic Legend of Heroes, like they talk about democracy over tea, you know, and stuff. But this is a good one. So Reinhard says, "Is democracy such a great thing? Didn't the Galactic Republic give birth to Rudolph? Wasn't it the one who delivered the Alliance into my hands, your own ruler, chosen by the free will of the people?" That's Job Trunicht, by the way. Democratic rule is a body chosen by its citizens and free will, which subsumes the power of spirit and self. Yang says, "If you'll excuse my rudeness, Your Excellency, your words are if the value of fire should be denied simply because arson exists. You may be true, but wouldn't you say that the same applies to dictatorship? You cannot deny the efficiency of government by a strong leadership simply because tyrants do exist." And Yang says, "Sorry, but I can. The right, the right to violate the rights of the people belongs to the people." I actually wrote here on the notes, Reinhard Sigma stares at these words. Yang says, "In other words, when the people gave power to Rudolph or to an incomparably smaller man like Job Trunicht,
belongs to you."
the responsibility belongs to the people, to no one else. That's the important point. The sin of dictatorship is that the people can push the failures of government onto one man. Compared to that cardinal sin, the accomplishments of 100 wise rulers seem small. In addition, a person with your exceptional talents is exceedingly rare. It's only natural that your accomplishments and your failures also stand out. Reinhard says, "Your ideology is bold and novel, but a bit extreme. I can only agree in principle. Do you intend to turn me to your point of view?" Yang, "No, not at all. I can only offer a counterpoint to yourself. Ideology seen from another side must give rise to counter-ideology. I merely point out that such a counterpoint such exists." Reinhard, "So no ideology is supreme, and no ideology stands alone? Is that your conviction?" "Not really, but that's just what I was thinking. I wouldn't call it a conviction. Perhaps in this universe there exists a solitary, absolute truth. Perhaps it clarifies every question, but that's out of the reach of my short hands." Reinhard, "Then my hands are even shorter than yours. I don't believe that absolute truth is necessary. I only need the power to freely accomplish my dreams. One could say its power is to not have to take orders from someone that one despises. You can't sit here and tell me you haven't wished the same." Yang says, "I despise those who hide in safety while they glorify war and patriotism and send other people to the battlefield while they relax behind the lines. It's a difficult thing to live with those people under the same flag. You're different. You're out there on the front lines. Please pardon my word. It's very admirable." Reinhard says, "I understand. It ended up being the only thing you approve of me after all. I'm honored." Then Reinhard asks what Yang will do, and asks what Yang will do if Reinhard just like lets him go, and Yang honestly answers that he will just retire.
Take a nap.
I'll take a nap.
Reinhard laughs and lets him go, and Reinhard gives him assurance that he will not exact any revenge on Alliance politicians or military officers.
Do they kiss beforehand?
They do not kiss beforehand. And I wrote in here, to be honest, this is probably the actual point that the New Vegas developers were trying to make when they had Kaiser talk about Hegelian dialectics. But they like totally fucked it up. Basically, the Empire and the Alliance are thesis and antithesis, and from those clashes, we find the right answers at the right time to a new synthesis form of government.
Synthesis.
Yeah. So after this, the Golden Low Dynasty is now formed. They officially form the Golden Low Dynasty. Reinhard is down bad because the two people who wanted to see it are no longer here, being Kirkais and Anna Rose.
What happened to Anna Rose?
She doesn't want to talk to him
She's
anymore.
just depressed
Oh,
and
well,
isolated.
Okay, for a second I
Well,
thought
she
died.
could see it, though.
Yeah, she could see it if she wanted.
Yeah, she doesn't want to, though.
Reinhardt wanted to be happy with her in a free
Correct.
society.
Yes.
And now she fucking hates it.
He, accelerates more political reforms, appoints an occupation government. He doesn't annex the Alliance, but he makes them a client state. And he is officially coronated as Kaiser. He did this because Oberstein opined that it was still too early for the Alliance to be directly integrated into the Empire, and thus advocated retaining a semblance of autonomy for the Alliance while simultaneously impoverishing it.
So base.
Reinhardt agrees, because he's right. There's a like minor scene where like some Hildegard's dad urges Reinhardt to go to meet some like crippled retard count, and the count like tries to assassinate him because he has delusions of grandeur, and Reinhardt like just refuses to like submit to him. It's a really cool scene. After this assassination plot, it's revealed that this is instigated by the terrorists, not terrorists, terrorists, who are also terrorists. Reinhardt then sends a bunch of fleets to Earth to subjugate the Terra Church, and they like go in and murder literally millions of people with axes, because the fanatics refuse to surrender. I guess I never talked about this because it's not really a good time, but so in the space battles, particularly, they don't use laser weapons on the ships generally. Besides, like, very, very short-range laser pistols, instead they fight with power armor and like special high-frequency axes, because a single hull breach from a laser blaster will destroy an entire ship because it's pressurized in the vacuum of space.
Those look pretty cool.
And so that's what they look like. I just wanted to... Those are the Imperial ones, but the Alliance ones looks very similar.
Are there no like suicide people who will just like go in, start blasting, and just take down a whole ship?
It's crazy that there's no thing like that ever. That would be very Chinese, to train people to just go laser
I guess
suicide.
not. Yeah, but they never bring it up.
Get in, shoot them up, get out. Well, you don't get out.
Yeah.
But
You get out into space.
10 million kamikazes.
I like the
tactical tank.
how you have the really futuristic looking power armor and then the actual medieval looking
So-
double axe.
Yeah, and then that's a terrorist cultist, by the way, being held up by his neck by a guy with the power armor.
For the Emperor.
What? Can anybody get in those? How?
And the power armor,
What kind of power armor is it? Just curious.
they don't really go into
You
it.
just get in and it makes you super,
It just makes it's like
or is it just
it
literally
protects
armor?
you from laser blasters.
Are you not running any faster or lifting any heavier?
Not
stuff?
really, yeah. I guess it's just armor, but it's like science armor.
Science
It
armor.
looks cool.
Works.
You just lost a piece of expensive.
But anyway, yeah. So yeah,
military
they like ruthlessly slaughter like millions of people. Also, Yulian is here because Yang sent him as like a undercover agent or something.
We haven't heard about him in forever.
Also, Mashengo is here too.
What is he? Has he been doing anything meaningful in the meantime?
I mean, he's been investigating the Terra cult.
Okay.
That's it. He just kind of like chills and then leaves.
Okay.
He ended up leaving like with the Imperial commanders because he does surrender with them.
Is he still doing this like in a made of?
No, but
Okay, good.
yeah. The commander, the Imperial commander, he's not important. His name's Kemp, but he does get stabbed by a fucking poison knife and has to get it amputated and get a prosthetic, which is kind of cool.
Get what amputated?
His arm.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Good.
during this time, Yang is just trying to be comfy and blanky moded. I forgot to mention this, by the way. He gets married to Frederica at this point.
Okay.
But the new Imperial consul, Leninkamp, who looks like Stalin, is
Leninkamp! What did they mean by this?
So the governor of Heinessen is on the planet, and he's just being a total asshole to Yang all the time for no reason. He's like harassing him, restricting his movements, tapping his calls, etc. And Yang unironically, literally just wants to do nothing and be left alone. And they keep making it hard for him. There are also rumors that Yang is involved with resistance groups. This isn't true yet, but they are still going around. Oberstein says that they should arrest Yang preemptively, so Reinhardt can use the subsequent uprising from anti-imperial groups as an excuse to completely annex the Alliance.
Please tell me Reinhardt does this. Please.
The head of the Alliance government decides to arrest Yang first to prevent this tactic from happening. They are going to execute Yang when the Rosenritter, by themselves, openly rebel,
Based.
murder the entire CIA on their own.
Base.
While like Shinkop's like saying one-liners about how much
And
he
just
hates
fucking
Glowies.
chopping shit.
Yeah, he's like, I fucking hate Glowies. Just chopping heads off. They kidnap the consul, the Stalin guy too. The plan is to use the consul as a hostage to demand safe passage out of Heinessen, after which the Alliance could claim that Yang forced their hand and urged the Empire to apprehend him.
Gotcha.
However, Lindenkampf kills himself in his cell with the cyanide tooth pill, and what they do...
The weirdest things exist in
Yeah.
this universe.
What they do is Frederica just like puts makeup on his corpse and they just like make a video message anyway.
Weekend and Bernie. Oh my god.
Weekend at Stalin.
No, don't eat it. He's earned another one.
I'm eating the last brownie.
Cut it in half. Cut it in half.
Hold on, that brownie's mine, bro.
They're my brownies, and I
It's okay. I have cookies inside. You can have a cookie.
let him have the brownie.
Fine.
Let him have the brownie.
Yeah, let him have it.
You
Can
can
I
eat
have
the
half of
crumbs.
it?
If you
Just give
want.
it a big lick and then put it back in the
I thought it was fun to do, but I didn't bite into it. I don't actually want it now because I'm talking.
The brownie war is about to begin.
Okay, so during this time, you guys remember Alpha Seal from earlier? How
Yeah.
Yang's the,
Oh,
the
yeah.
hero of Alpha Seal?
Yeah.
Alpha Seal has decided to declare independence from the Empire,
Oh gee, I wonder
And
how
the
that's
Alliance.
gonna work out.
and they try to recruit Yang the entire time. Yang is not really keen on this. He doesn't really want to do it. He kind of just fucks off to some hidden supply base where...
Oh, a supply base, real original
His-
Yang.
yeah, his,
yeah.
his
Um,
hometown.
and oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier, but like,
Every supply base.
when Yang surrendered, he like sent like half of his fleet with like Admiral Meerkats to like hide in the supply base. So he has like a little bit of troop power, and they're just chilling on some asteroids somewhere. They also at this point release the dead consul's body in like a sealed capsule and like push it towards the Empire with like a note in it.
In space?
Yeah, in space. Yeah, they like push it out in space. And, like they say like how
All
someone will find
Voyager
it.
style.
Yeah.
There's the golden record.
Right,
Except it's some dead guy with makeup on.
yeah, basically. Yeah. Reinhard realizes exactly what has happened. He gets the full information. He makes a big broadcast announcement, publicly apologizing for Lindenkampf's actions to Yang directly, but then also saying that the Alliance has violated their treaty and that he is now declared war again on the Alliance. Yang is now in a rough spot, so him, Meerkats, and Julian finally go to Alpha Seal, and they decide to recapture Iserlohn again. So now we have
Quarter?
the 10th Battle of Iserlohn.
Oh.
When Reinhardt declared war, that's the second Alliance Imperial War. Is when
Okay.
it's declared.
That's right.
Not going to go over it too much, but basically, before this, Reinhard mobilizes against the remnants of the Alliance, led by Bukak, who gives a masterfully tactical defense with overwhelmingly smaller numbers by using like dangerous space terrain. But in the end, it's not enough.
What space terrain?
Reinhard offers Bukak surrender at the urging of Hildegard only. And Bukak tells all the crews of his fleet that they can now abandon ship and surrender if they wish. And then he gets on a call with Reinhard, and like him and like his second officer, they have a drink together in front of Reinhard, and basically says, me and Yang were people that could have been your friends, Reinhard, but never your subordinates. I'm sorry to say, but this old dog isn't built for surrender. A final toast to democracy, and then they open fire and kill him. It's very sad. Bukak's a cool character. And this is actually an important point in that, like, part of the reason that Reinhard is so stubbornly pursuing Yang is because after the death of Kierkeist, Reinhard has actually no friends. And Yang is, like, the only person he feels like he could respect enough to truly see him as an equal. Everyone else, he has tons of loyal and effective subordinates, but no one that he truly views as an equal. And that makes it really hard for him. So anyway, during this time, Yang had successfully recaptured Iserlohn again using the triple reverse bait. He does some psyop shit, where he like sends conflicting orders in Reinhardt's name to both launch from and remain inside Iserlohn. The commander decides that the orders to remain in Iserlohn are genuine, and that the Yang irregulars intended to lure his fleet out and capture Iserlohn in his absence. Then the commander decides to feint leaving Iserlohn and entrap the irregulars while they emerge to seize the fortress. However, this was the reverse triple bait Yang was planning all along. They use the back door that Yang set up to unlock the defense systems. The Rosenritter secure the control room and fire the Thor hammer on the commander's fleet. The commander tries to hold out a little bit longer, realizes it's hopeless, surrenders, and then negotiates safe passage for his men and the remaining men on Iserlohn with Yang, and then commits suicide.
Did Oberstein recognize this?
Oberstein was not aware of this.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
He's never wrong about something he's
Never
aware
wrong.
of.
yeah.
He's
Woke up in
never
a cold sweat.
either right or is unaware.
He seems like the only character in this series who does spice.
Oberstein would never do drugs and never have
You're
sex.
right, actually. Yeah.
I'm making sure Oberstein knows what sex is.
He does have like mentat energy.
That is true, though.
I
Yeah.
like that energy. The lips become a warning.
So yeah, Yang now controls Iserlohn again. He just wishes to reach a stalemate and allow for democracy to coexist with Reinhardt. And Iserlohn's unique defense and situation make this possible because it's going to be very difficult to attack Iserlohn directly head on. And Yang is a very skilled commander. Also, it's important to note here that Yulian gets a love interest that is Shinkop's bastard child from like some bitch he like dated at a bar once and fucked and left. He doesn't even remember his mom's name, but like the girl is really mad about it. She's like a fighter pilot or something, and she hates Shinkop, but Shinkop just laughs and calls her a stupid bitch, basically.
Is that the Cursed by Women guy?
No, that's
No,
the Rosenritter commander.
Oh.
The
guy who also not cursed by women, but fucked a lot of women.
Yeah, correct. He's the man's man kind of guy.
Yeah.
So Reinhardt steps foot on Heinessen for the first time an emperor has ever done so, and formally annexes it. The head of the alliance government, he's like Bloau Rebello guy I mentioned earlier. He's killed by some alliance admiral who thinks he can curry favor from Reinhardt by taking care of him, but Reinhardt just executes the admiral for being a betraying faggot.
Loyalty is the ultimate.
Yeah, loyalty is the only political virtue, and the admiral's like, what the fuck? No. So there's a guy I haven't talked about here, who I need to bring up now, who is, I forget his first name, but his last name is Lang. Now, Lang was the former head of the secret police, and Reinhardt begrudgingly, during like that first, commander appointing era, keeps him around to head a pseudo secret police. Now Lang is like the tip of he is actually court eunuch energy. This man is like scheming to like do everything, steal the alliance out from Reinhardt's nose, even though he has no chance of winning the empire because he's like a fat little coward, basically. But he does lead, these secret police, basically. And what's funny is that he tries to always say he's like part of Oberstein's division and like push the blame on Oberstein, but Oberstein like despises Lang and thinks he's like a slimy little faggot, basically. By the way, Oberstein leads like the CIA, the Imperial CIA now at this point. Unsurprising. So there's like a scene.
The Gestapo.
Yeah, Gestapo. Well, no. Oberstein leads the CIA. Lang leads the Gestapo.
Okay.
That's actually the more accurate.
Yeah.
So there's some scene where like there's like a big staff meeting where Royenthal, like I don't remember what happens, but Royenthal basically dabs on Lang and calls him like a fat loser. And like Lang is like really mad about this and holds like a grudge for the rest of the series. And so Lang starts to like start false accusations against Royenthal because Royenthal has been fucking Lichtenlad's daughter, who is a BPD schizo, and uses this as like the justification for like Royenthal being a traitor. Reinhardt, however, sees through Lang's lies and reinstates Royenthal and makes him Governor General of the former Alliance territories, which means like he controls like Heinessen and the other their stuff. So they try to go back to Aizulon again, and they're like, we're going to capture it with military force. We're going to show Yang Wenli who's boss. They come, Bittenfeld and some other guy come to secure the space around Aizulon and wait for him. Also, Mecklinger comes around from the Imperial side and pincer Yang in. At this time, there's also an attempted terrorist bombing in Fazan that kills some minor characters and almost kills Oberstein. By the way, I don't remember, at this point, Yang has now moved the galactic capital from Odin to Fazan, which is in the middle of the two empires for obvious symbolic reasons. So Mecklinger is tricked by thinking Yang has a much larger fleet than he does, while Yang sallies forth from the fortress, and Mecklinger retreats, not wanting to risk the safety of the Empire to, if Yang actually did invade, and just blockades the corridor. While Reinhardt is in transit, Yang baits Bittenfeld and Fahrenheit by first pretending Meerkatz is defecting back to the Empire and being chased by Yang, and then also basically calling Bittenfeld like a pussy faggot over the mic, basically. And Bittenfeld gets like really butthurt. One of the other commanders sacrifices himself to allow the majority of the fleets to escape. There are massive fleet losses. It's a disaster for the Empire. Reinhardt finally shows up. There's a long-ass battle with Yang. It results in them both losing a lot of minor characters. It's like 2 episodes long. I won't get into it. Basically, it ends in a stalemate because Reinhardt is winning the battle due to simple numerical strength, but retreats suddenly because he has suddenly fallen ill. Reinhardt wakes up from his illness, demands a ceasefire, which Yang happily accepts, wanting peace in the first place. It's later revealed that he did this because Kierkeis appeared to him in a dream while he was ill and reminded him of earlier conversations that told him to make friends of Yang Wenli. And it also echoes back to Bucock's speech that I talked about earlier. Yet Reinhardt desperately seeks Yang's counsel after the lack of Kierkeis, as he has the entire galaxy under his fingertips, but not a single person that he can call his friend. He is utterly alone and miserable. Royenthal remarks about the illness. It is not, he thought that Reinhardt loved war by nature, rather war was like a vital nutrient that the golden-haired emperor needed to survive. And were these repeated fevers not a sign of the boundless craving of that spirit within him was too powerful for his body to bear, young and healthy though he was? So Reinhardt goes to have negotiations with Yang. During its fortune, I just want to mention here that Oberstein suggests assassinating Yang Wenli by tricking him by using himself as a hostage to promote safe passage for Yang to our Imperial troops, and then killing Yang as soon as he arrives, and then Oberstein's like willing to sacrifice himself to die so that Yang Wenli will die too.
Well, let's go, boys!
Yeah. Reinhardt refuses.
Fringe.
And Yang is on his way, to go talk to Reinhardt. However, Yang is fucking assassinated by terrorists.
No fucking way.
Terrorists. Yes, terrorists fucking kill Yang. They board his ship, they fucking shoot him in the femoral artery, and he slowly bleeds out brutally and terribly. And I believe Muller actually finds his corpse and is like really mad about it.
Could Oberstein even have conceived of this?
He actually did not. He didn't expect it, because he expected the terrorists to attack Reinhardt, not to attack Yang.
That seems like he was
Is this
wrong.
evidence that Oberstein was actually working for the terrorists the whole time?
Oberstein never worked for the terrorists.
There are 2 possibilities. Either he was working for the terrorists, or he was wrong.
Well, actually, I'm actually like 90% positive they do talk about this, and they say that Oberstein had thought about the possibility, but like, he wanted to kill Yang Wenli anyway, so if the terrorists killed him, it wouldn't matter.
Oh, it's still not technically.
It wasn't anything. It wasn't worth making a plan about. It's like, maybe they'll just do it for me. Truly, the man saw everything.
Reinhardt is fucking pissed. Okay, he's fucking furious. Yeah, he actually has like a big Hamlet-like rage soliloquy, like, everyone leaves me, enemies, friends, everyone. Why do they not live on for my sake? and it's time to brutally torture and murder all of the remaining
It's time
terrorists.
for me to kill.
So he does so. He rips their arms off, gouges out their eyes, he fucks them up really bad. The last person he could hope to call a friend is now gone, and he's fucking alone and punished. He sends an envoy to Iserlohn with Muller and some other guys, and they tell Iserlohn that they're going to kill all the terrorists, by the way, even if that's not what Yang would have wanted, and that they won't recognize Iserlohn formally, but they also won't attack it either, and it will exist in de facto legitimacy as long as Reinhard lives. That's the end of that conflict, basically.
Okay.
The war is
the
over.
Iserlohn Republic.
Correct. That was the Battle of the Corridor. The Iserlohn Republic is founded officially a little bit later. But,
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so during this time, after this time, Schrunik goes up to Reinhard and, shamelessly asks him for a job, and Reinhard says, I had a job for you. Why don't you go back to Heinesen and be the director of public policy? And as a joke. And then Job just actually does it because he has no shame. And Royenthal meets him and despises him instantly. Reinhard visits a war memorial in a big ceremony on some planet. I think it's on Heinesen. And there's an assassination attempt on his life. They assume it's terrorists, but it's not. It's easily prevented by his bodyguards. But Reinhard is completely shaken because the man publicly and loudly accuses Reinhard of complicity in the Westerland massacre, which he is correct about.
Yes.
Reinhard knows that the guy is right about it. He's very insistent that the guy not be... he wants to pardon him and release him fully. The guy ends up committing suicide in prison, but he makes very clear that he's not going to execute him. But when this exact scene happens, Reinhard goes catatonic and does not talk until Oberstein steps in and says, "Your hatred is founded on false premises. I was the one who did the thermonuclear attack on Westerland. I should have been your target, not the Kaiser. You might even have been successful. Certainly fewer people would have interceded." It's important to note that,
he didn't drop the bomb. He just
but he's responsible. He's responsible for it. It's important to note that, it is true that, pretty much everyone in the Empire, hates von Oberstein, too, by the way. Kaiser is fucked up by this. He basically has the Dark Night of the Soul here. This is when things get the worst. He then immediately goes to Hildegard, and he basically has the moment where he breaks down and, sits in her lap and calls her mommy, and she tells him it'll all be okay, and he, sexually commands her to stay the night, and they, fuck in the shower.
Finally.
I have a quote here from the book only.
Why
That's
did Yang have to fucking die?
Why did Yang? I know.
Fucking damn it.
yeah.
This is literally like when fucking L dies in death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although there's still some cool stuff that happens after Elle dies, to be fair, in this story.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
After Yang dies in this story, there's still some cool stuff that happens.
Okay.
But I have a quote from the book here that what Kaiser Reinhard sought from Hildegard wrote one historian, was less sexual romantic fulfillment than wise counsel and thoughtful advice in matters both public and private. The Kaiser was free of the terrible prejudice that might have led another to undervalue her genius by reason of her being a woman. And she does give legitimately good advice and is kind of a based,
A woman.
Mommy.
sly womanly charm, basically. The next day, Reinhard is super flustered, immediately asks for her hand in marriage, and it's actually a pretty funny gap moe scene, because they talk a lot about how Reinhard is both he's up to this point he's been completely impervious to towards women's advances on him. They sent tons of beauties to try and get him to have a wife, and
Very Chinese.
he's just been get out of my sight, you fucking freaks.
Very Chinese.
And so they talk a lot about how he acts like a little boy and he doesn't know what to do and he's really awkward. Hildegard,
As the most-
Hildegard, is like really. She doesn't get back to him about it. She says she'll talk to him later, and she doesn't consider the marriage proposal immediately. By the way, Reinhard is getting sicker every day. He is having more and more bed rests, more and more unconscious episodes, and the doctors have no idea what is wrong with him. Also, at this time, von Royenthal is starting to be schemed against again by Lang and Rubinsky. If you remember Rubinsky, he was the former leader of Fazan, who was still around, hiding basically in Fazan. There are rumors circulating that Royenthal is going to invite him.
That means it's disconnected.
Oh, my phone.
Or either that or that ran out of battery.
My phone ran out of battery. So.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Turn off the thing so it doesn't,
Okay, so the rumors are circulating that Royenthal is going to invite Reinhard to Heinessen and assassinate him there. In order to test Reinhard's belief in the rumors, Royenthal actually does just this. The Kaiser accepts, but on their way they make a stop on some planet where there's another assassination attempt. But this time it's more serious, and Reinhard barely escapes, and it's also not orchestrated by terrorists. It's just a mutiny from Imperial soldiers. At one point, they're almost to the escape ship when they're stopped by 10 mutineers who are staring down Reinhard with their rifles, with flames at Reinhard back, and Reinhard has no way to escape. And Reinhard just gets up and screams, "Shoot me! There's only one Reinhard von Lohengrin, and there will only be one man whose name will be remembered for killing me. Who wants to be that man?" And the mutineers just give up after this. They're kind of like mogged. They're kind of like mogged into submission. Reinhard just pardons them and walks past them into his ship and leaves. So after this, and I'm not gonna get into the whole intrigue, but basically it's why didn't Royenthal stop this? Why hasn't he done anything to apologize? And more and more plotting is being done against Royenthal to make him seem like a traitor. Royenthal doesn't really know how to approach Reinhard to explain the attack, and he doesn't know the exact circumstances either, and he keeps thinking about Reinhard's words, and decides that if he is going to be blamed for the treasonous attack, he would rather be a traitor in truth than let Lang continue to speak badly upon him.
What the fuck?
So he rebels against Reinhard, and justifies it to his men as removing corrupt vassals, Oberstein and Lang, from Reinhard who are poisoning his influence. Reinhard sends Mittermeier, Royenthal's best friend, to quell the rebellion. Mittermeier tries and fails to convince Royenthal to stop with peace. After a long victory, where Royenthal comments that, now I finally understand how great Yang Wenli was because I am now fighting with a numerically inferior force and realize how hard it is. He's unable to claim victory after a long battle with Mittermeier, and on his retreat to Heinessen, one of Royenthal's subordinates betrays him and fires upon his battleship, whereupon a metal shard impales Royenthal on the chest, but does not kill him. He is now bleeding out for the remainder of his life. He declines surgery in order to still command and manages to successfully retreat, and then returns to his office. He returns to his office in Heinessen, realizing his wounds are fatal, and attends to his final duties. He appoints governor to send to his absence, sends his final messages, write his wills. And by the way, it's important that Royenthal...
So, in all of this time that he has, while he's bleeding out from a wound, nobody can treat his wound and stop the bleeding.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like medical technology is very good.
It's kind of a plot hole, but it doesn't. Don't think about it too hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, so Royenthal knows that his rebellion is futile, that he will suffer a death no one will extol, and that he still does it anyway, in an unironically Mishima-esque sort of way. Job, while he's attending to all of his final duties, Job Trunicht is called to Royenthal's office about Trunicht's plans, and then Trunicht says some really spineless shit about democracy, being so bad that they let a person like him be elected, and that the populace is all stupid morons.
But the people are retarded.
Royenthal accuses Trunick of letting the terrorists take advantage of him. Trunick denies it and says he took advantage of them. Trunick says, I take advantage of everything I can. Religion, political systems, the Kaiser, anything. Yes, even the Kaiser, who you rebelled against. That kitty who, as talented as he is far from a perfect human being. As for that arrogant genius of that blonde brat, I'm sure you were also quite annoyed by it. And then Trunick, smiles heartily, thinking he's endeared himself to Royenthal. And Royenthal also smiles, and then calmly pulls out a laser pistol from his breast pocket and shoots Trunick 8 times in the chest.
Nice.
Royenthal says, I don't give a fuck if you belittle Republican democracy, profit at the expense of the nation, or deceive the people, but I won't allow you to soil the Kaiser's dignity with your filthy, shit-filled tongue. I neither served nor rebelled against a Kaiser who could be insulted by someone like you. And then he just leaves Trunick to bleed out on the floor. Some time is passing. Royenthal is on the verge of death, and the BPD bitch comes to see him. They have some banter, and Royenthal... Oh, by the way, the whole time the BPD has been talking about how much he wants to kill Royenthal, but they still have sex all the time. But Royenthal is basically like, hey, you can finally kill me now. Do it. You're going to lose your chance if you don't do it now.
Just wait for 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, but she doesn't do it, and she simply leaves because she thinks it'll be more fun to watch him, bleed out in pain. Royenthal is trying to stay alive long enough to see Mittermeier arrive for a final farewell. Mittermeier ends up arriving, but Royenthal is already dead. He is sitting regally in his chair with a letter on his desk with 2 bottles of brandy laid out in advance, waiting for their farewell that never comes.
Oh, man.
Mittermeier rips an imperial flag from the wall, drapes it over his body like a cape, and reads the letter, which says something along the lines of Mein Kaiser, Mittermeier, Siegsterben, and the book talks about historians being conflicted on what the message actually meant. Also, it's revealed that apparently Royenthal had a son with the BPD bitch, who they
Mittermeier did?
Royenthal did with the BPD bitch. And the BPD bitch had left it there in the office. And he had asked Mittermeier to care for it since Mittermeier and his wife had problems conceiving. Which he does, and they name him Felix.
And that's the origin story
of Reason.
XQC.
And it's sort of loosely foreshadowed that, Royenthal's kid may take hold of the dynasty in the future. With vague, symbolic, he reaches for the stars and is do a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of very vague symbolic stuff. Mittermeier has an Odyssean weep for Royenthal in his office. And then Reinhard is bedridden at this point completely. Hearing the news, regrets he was not able to fight Royenthal himself, and remarks that he would have preferred if Royenthal won, maybe. Maybe he seeks self-destruction, and he posthumously grants Royenthal a promotion. Reinhard is described here as sickly but beautiful still. At times, it must be confessed, the impression was somewhat inorganic, but mysteriously he never struck others as drawn or haggard. Lang is arrested and admits to dealing with Rubinsky, to Reinhard's head of MP, how he incited the rebellion. Mecklinger had also been independently investigating and reveals all the information to Reinhard that Royenthal had never actually betrayed him in the first place, and Reinhard executes Lang after torturing him, and is once again left without a second in command and all alone. Before this, Lang is a total bitch, tries to throw Oberstein under the bus, which is a lie. Despite Royenthal and Oberstein hating each other, Oberstein harbored no ill will towards him, and in fact, in a private conversation with his aide, after Oberstein speaks praise towards Royenthal in his own weird way, and lets out the slightest smile for the only time in the series, and the aide visibly soy faces in shock when he sees it happen. The Kaiser and Hilda get married. Hilda is now 4 months pregnant. During the wedding, Oberstein autistically power walks up to the Kaiser and informs him very loudly that there are riots and Republican uprisings on Heinessen, destroying the safety of the wedding. Everyone is flabbergasted, and Binnenfeld tries to beat him up. And then Oberstein replies, auspicious events can be put off until later, but inauspicious ones require immediate attention. The security of the empire is at stake. Whatever His Majesty may decide to do,
Holy
he must at
shit.
least know the situation.
Holy shit.
And again, they begrudgingly look on him with like a disgusted awe, basically.
So base. He's our
you
guy.
know,
he really is
our
so
guy.
It's really interesting though that he didn't like just decide to do something himself rather than like go and talk
Fair.
to the Kaiser about it.
Yeah, fair.
I guess so. I guess
The
so.
Kaiser
But
decision.
the
But-
thing,
but,
the thing
like-
is though, like unlike Lang, Oberstein has done all of his actions are for the good of the empire.
Uh-huh. But
No matter
but
what.
also like that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to involve the Kaiser in literally every
Fair,
decision.
but I think yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I forgot to mention this earlier, but around this point, this is when the Eidolon book was formed. It's not important, but like the vast
It's
majority
not
of
important, but it's on the timeline.
well, okay, it's important. It's important. So the vast majority of people have left, and Julian's now the leader
Of the Eidolon?
of Eidolon, yeah.
Nice.
Which is not like an official, de jure republic that Reinhard tolerates, basically.
It's a planet.
It's as big
It's
as a
not
planet.
really a
Instead of a ship.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big Death Star, but it's as big as a planet.
Yeah.
Is it a big circle, by the way?
Yes, it's a big one.
Wow.
Something they don't mention
Real
in the anime,
original.
but they don't mention this in the anime, but apparently Oberstein like cunningly stopped all galactic navigation data from being destroyed, and historians view it as like his greatest achievement, arguably. It was never brought up in the anime, but I thought it was worth mentioning. This was all done by Rubinsky, apparently, from like hiding. It didn't work though. For some reason, Eidolon decides to re-engage hostilities. They like Beta Commanders fleet in. They have a battle. It's not really important.
What number are we on?
That is the
11th.
So the battle with Roy and Talmittermeyer was the second battle of Rancho Mario, and now we're at the 11th battle of Eidolon.
Holy shit.
The 11th.
To be fair, we only started at the 8th, so.
Yeah, fair.
Do they say anything ever about the preceding battles of Eidolon?
No, they do not. Hey, it's starting to get less foamy.
They figured having to deal with 4 over the course of the series.
Yeah.
I've had like 3 inches of it so far. It's pretty good.
I like it a lot. It's
Yeah.
pretty good. Okay, so Oberstein is put in charge of the Neuland, which is the Alliance territories, with Admirals Bittenfeld, Muller, and Wallen under his command. Bittenfeld, all of them despise Oberstein, but Bittenfeld really despises Oberstein. And immediately upon arriving, Oberstein starts arresting political prisoners and basically anyone that has ever held any position of power in the Alliance whatsoever. When the 3 admirals find this out, they storm his office, and this is the scene I wanted to play.
Okay.
So originally here, I had intended to have a clip from the show. That's what I did in the actual lecture. Everyone got around a laptop and watched it. However, I have a copyright claim that blocks it in most countries, so you'll just have to find it on your own. I'll link to it in the description because somehow that scene is up on, some other person's YouTube channel, but it doesn't allow it on mine.
But yeah, so that's what he sounds like. And
Just said something
Every
based.
internal
So
monologue is
cute.
always, well, yeah, he's right.
Yes, he's right.
Yeah. We wouldn't have had to lose the lives of those 2 soldiers.
Yeah. Okay, so. But yeah, so it's a tacit. Oh wait, yeah. Oh wait. Do pop Charlotte.
Just go.
It's a tacit admission that Oberstein is going without notifying the Kaiser, but it's important to note that that's exactly why Reinhard chose Oberstein in the first place, because he does the dirty work for the sake of peace and prosperity that no one else is willing to do. Reinhard finds this out, and even though Oberstein, essentially called the Kaiser, a piece of shit for sacrificing all those lives, Reinhard's kind of like, I mean, yeah, you're right.
When you're right, you're right.
And he kind of gives a begrudging, sheepish sort of smirk. Oberstein ends up issuing that ultimatum to Iserlohn to come and negotiate on Heinesen. Julian accepts, but only on the condition of an escort. Reinhard is on his way to quell the rebellions that are going on Heinesen.
Where did this come from, dude?
I don't know.
We've just been outside for too long
I guess
without
so.
playing. You humans just keep barking at each other.
But yeah, so during this time, while Julian's on his way to go to Heinessen,
What's he doing? Silly. Oh, nice leap. Yeah. Go, Sven. Go. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
That's so impressive. How did you learn how to run that fast? Wow. Wow.
We can just ignore him. Continue.
Yes. He just needed a little bit of attention.
We should let him give one.
Yeah, let's end it.
the history of the ball, the ball lore lecture.
The ball war.
Okay, yeah, so Reinhardt's on his way to quell the rebellions in Heinessen. During this time, the political prisoners... Hey, that's not for you. That's not for you. The political prisoners all riot, hundreds are killed, and there is mass panic on the streets. Oberstein then does what he describes as house cleaning. He arrests Rubinsky, by the way, who he had apparently known about, because he has a brain tumor, and they independently looked through every medical record in the entire galaxy for indiscrepancies and found him on that.
Okay.
Reinhardt issues another offer of negotiations, this time in his name, not Oberstein's. And also Reinhardt orders Oberstein to dispose of the insects being terrorists. Julian writes, at this point, Reinhard von Lohengrin was a foe of Republican democracy in the gravest sense. Not because he was a cruel and stupid ruler, but because he was just the opposite. The polar opposite of democratic republicanism is the longing for a savior, the idea that because the people lack the ability to reform society, right its wrongs, and resolve its inconsistencies, they must await the arrival of a transcendental great man.
A trans man?
At this time, an assassination attempt is done by the terrorists on Honoros and Hilda, who is very pregnant and bedridden. It almost fucking works. The entire palace is on fire. A terrorist gets into their room, and was just like, stop, do you know who you're talking to? That's the Kaiser, and like, you dumb bitch, shut the fuck up. Anna-Rose doesn't, yeah. Yeah, Anna-Rose, because Hildegard's pregnant, Anna-Rose decides to come to Fazan to help Hildegard, basically. It almost fucking works, and then Hilda pulls a gun out of her tits and shoots the fucking guy in the head. And then immediately after shooting him, goes into labor.
I mean, that's a thing.
Not sure if base.
Yeah.
Women, I think the water breaks when they're stressed, isn't that a thing?
Makes sense.
Anyone here been pregnant? Tell me.
I don't know.
Shoot self in stomach. Water breaks.
They are rescued, and they give the birth to a son. They name him Alexander.
Oh
Obviously.
my God.
Alexander Siegfried von Lohe.
That's it's literally like naming your child Genghis Alexander.
Yeah, Genghis, and then like my
Genghis
best friend's
Khan.
name.
Yeah, Genghis, my gay lover.
Yeah.
Oh, was Kai's first name Siegfried?
Kirkeis's
Yeah.
first name was Siegfried.
Yeah.
So there's after this there's a refugee ship of Republicans on their way to Iserlohn, which is ambushed. The Iserlohn ship sortie to defend them and escort them to Iserlohn. However, this draws the Kaiser's ire, and we finally have the 11th Battle of Iserlohn. They have a space battle with Reinhard, and they have literally one plan, and that plan is to go find Reinhard and talk to him. It's finally announced that the Kaiser's
Just
illness...
like Fire Emblem tactics here.
Seriously, yeah. We need to talk to the Emperor.
It's finally revealed that the Kaiser's illness is terminal, as he loses consciousness for like a day during the battle. They don't know how long he has to live. And so Julian, Schenkopf, and some other minor characters successfully board the ship. Reinhard sees them board and says, if Julian can overcome the resistance of my soldiers and reach me, it would only be fair to recognize his valor and accept his demands on equal footing. If, on the other hand, Minsk could not make his way here without relying on the mercy of my autocracy or the assistance of his ministers, he will have no right to demand anything from someone like me. Nothing shall begin until he shows himself in my presence. He summons all of his remaining energy to get dressed into his imperial regalia and sit majestically on his private throne. There's a bloody fight on the way to Reinhard in which Shimkop dies. He does this after, like, single-handedly killing, like, about 150 guys. Some guy stabs him in the back, and then he slices the guy's head off. Two other guys, come up behind him again, try to stab him in the back with axes. They're sticking out of him, and he's, like, blood squirting out. He turns around, slices their heads off.
So is the episode here like a juxtaposition of all this ultra-violence and then Reinhardt struggling to get ready and stand up?
Basically.
Okay, that sounds really cool.
And then like, so Shinkop's, like, all the Imperial soldiers are, like, looking at Shimkop with, like, 2 axes in his back and, like, blood spurting, and he's just, like, smiling at him, like, I'm fucking ready. And Shimkop just, like, walks towards them, and they just, like, move out of the way, and then he, like, gets up on the stairs, and, like, sits down, and he talks about how he, like, wants to, like, die looking down on the Empire as he does. And he gives his last words, which is, before my death, my parting words, I need no inscription on my gravestone. Only the tears of beautiful women will bring peace to my soul. Basically, every minor character in the Alliance side... every minor character in the Alliance side basically dies in this scene, including Meerkats. And then finally, Yulian makes it to Kaisar and immediately faints upon seeing him after he, like, killed, like, 50 people on his way there. And then Reinhard says to cease fire and orders the doctors to help Yulian because they can't help Reinhard. They wake up, and Julian's like, all right, time to discuss. You gotta reform Parliament. You gotta reform the Empire and make it parliamentary democracy. And Reinhard, like, cuts him off, and he's like, don't care. I'm dying. Talk to my wife. Because Reinhard already knows that's what Yulian wants to talk about. He doesn't give a shit. He actually says that he's better off talking to his better half. And, like, they talk in the book about how, like, it's like a boast of a loving husband. Basically, like, Yulian is ordered by Reinhard to return to Fazan with him. And they just, like, talk on the ship. And Reinhard doesn't give a fuck about any of Yulian's philosophy, ignores him every time, and just wants to hear anecdotes about Yang Wenli. All they do is, like, drink, play chess, and talk about Yang Wenli.
Which, incidentally, is probably all that Yang Wenli actually did with Yulian.
Yeah, fair. I wrote in my notes here, Reinhard's Kaiser cell persona is revealed here more than ever. There's a quote from the book that, according to Yulian's recollections, great as the Kaiser was, his sense of humor was somewhat underdeveloped. 2 jokes out of every 5 left him baffled and struggling to understand. Real German here. And yeah, Reinhard kind of was a cell to a certain extent. It's also revealed here that, like, the Kaiser Erwin Joseph the toddler died at some point from drinking chemicals under the sink. That's not a joke.
That's not.
No. The one who was, like, the previous Kaiser from the Golden Dynasty. I guess so. Oh, and, like, apparently, like, the count who, like, abducted him was, like, so torn up that he, like, abducted a body from the morgue and, like, dressed it up like a real child. And, like, pretended it was the real
Is this
Kaiser.
novel only shit?
That's in the anime.
Wow. Wow.
It's,
abducting a child corpse is in the anime?
Yep.
Wow.
They don't show him, like, literally going to the morgue and, like, dragging it out.
Okay.
They do show, like, the disgusting, like, makeup corpse.
That's almost worse.
Yeah. So they arrive in Fazan. Yulian agrees to a treaty with Hildegard to allow Republican space on the former Alliance side in exchange for relinquishing Iserlohn back to the Empire. and Reinhardt prepares for his last days. However, the Church of Terra is at it again, baby. They got one more try. This is the last one.
Oh, fuck.
The Hail Mary, the money shot, baby.
This is because Oberstein lured them out to finish them once and for all by leaking fake info that Reinhardt's health was improving and that he would go and blow up Earth as soon as he recovered. Julian and the rest of his gang actually saved the Kaiser's life directly by killing some terrorists at one point. There are fires everywhere, and literally half of the capital explodes because apparently Rubinsky had a dead man switch in his brain. And then he fucking died of cancer and half of his envelope.
Wait, what the... Okay, so medical technology is advanced enough to put a dead man switch in your brain, but not advanced enough to save a man who is bleeding out for 4 hours.
Look, man. Oh, it's way longer for 4 hours.
Yeah, okay.
It's like 2 days.
Yeah, for what? Yeah, okay.
days?
For 2 days?
Yeah.
For 2 days. I don't know. Wait, I can.
It'll close out on
So
its own.
suppose, like if I were a hemophiliac, and I made a half an inch long cut on my finger, that would take probably less than 2 days for me to bleed out.
It's directly stated that Royenthal. It's not just that Royenthal couldn't be treated. It's that he refused to treat.
Want to, yeah.
And it's
Yes,
very much outright stated that outright implied.
But still, any wound that would have killed you over the course of 2 days would have healed up anyway.
Yeah, probably. But Royenthal wanted to die. He was self-destructive.
Okay,
that was basically the whole point.
Just kept picking the scab.
Yeah. At this, bad news. Yeah, so half the capital explodes, and this is where the most tragic scene in the anime happens. Oberstein fucking dies.
No!
Because
How?
he heroically had provided other PSYOP info to blow up his part of the palace rather than Reinhardt's. And they find him, and this is the scene where they can't treat him because you see him in the anime and literally half of his fucking side is blown off.
Okay.
And he actually refuses superficial treatment. This is where he says the dogs eat dog food line, and that they make sure to feed his dog chicken every night.
What was he? He says, "Take care of my dog when I die."
Yeah, that's basically it. Those were his last words. It's feed him. He only eats chicken or something. And then they reflect here on Oberstein's whole character, and everything. Reinhardt dies in the arms of Hildegard while everyone's still alive. Important is there, including Julian, and then that's the end of the story.
Okay.
Reinhardt died.
And novel ends there.
Reinhardt dies.
Novel ends there too.
Novel ends there too. There's actually more scenes in the anime after he dies than in the novel.
Wow.
So
it's just minor epilogue.
Okay.
Stuff.
What is
But
that
before
question?
The question mark is Reinhardt dying. I just didn't want to say it.
before I applaud, I have a question.
Okay.
So, in the broader scope of things, this is more of an analysis type of question. Do you think that in the log continuity, which do you think is a greater force, incest or bussy?
Bussy for sure.
Okay.
In fact, I don't think there's really any incest.
Even though
No, that one dude marries his cousin.
no,
It's like a distant cousin.
Even
It's like a second or third.
even though Reinhardt's desire to help his sister is
It is very Oedipin in a certain way. He does not have a mother.
is a prime mover in one of the two greatest figures in the universe's ascent to power. Okay.
I still think it's probably Bussy.
Okay.
I just didn't feel like it was
That
important enough
makes-
to keep
yeah,
saying about how many
yeah.
times Reinhardt talked about how much he misses Siegfried.
I
But
guess
he does. He definitely does.
Okay.
Also, I forget to mention, but he gets a 14-year-old twink catamite aid.
Okay, you're
at one
right.
point.
You're right. You're right.
At one
you're
point
right.
too.
If that's true, then you're right. Yeah, Bussy is the more powerful force.
Even more so over the Wilson man.
Yeah. It's a shame how that is.
God damn. That was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Great, now I don't have to watch it now.
This was honestly one of the best lectures that we've had of this. I think.
Oh, thank you.
Like
At 3 hours and 20 minutes.
it didn't seem like 3 hours. It's,
You could
yeah.
bring for
That's actually
the
pretty
Metal
good
Gear Solid.
How long was the Metal Gear Solid?
Over 4 hours.
Oh,
yeah.
I can see that.
I wasn't, and I skipped over a whole lot, to be fair. I basically left out, like, most of Metal Gear Solid 4.
Well, I mean, like we've had some pretty damn long lectures.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like my Achewood lecture was probably like 4 hours.
It was 4 hours.
So in the epilogue,
Yeah.
like any like inkling about
And was
the future of the Empire? Did it,
So
like,
it's
break apart,
sort of,
Civil
it's
War?
like I said, there's another scene where like Felix is sort of like, you know, reaching up with the stars and stuff like that, and it's sort of like very, very loosely implied that there'll be a conflict between
Felix and
future Reinhardt's son and Royenthal's son.
Mhm.
That's about it.
Alexander.
wait a
versus
minute.
Felix.
Wait a minute. So does this all take place in one galaxy?
Right.
Because it's called
Yeah.
Legend of Galactic.
I don't know.
But-
Takes place in space.
Okay.
That could mean that they're just here and there.
Yeah. That's what I was wondering because we were like he's the emperor of the universe, but he's like, is he like?
So,
Oh, by the way, this is what the Alliance ships look like, and that's what the Imperial ships look like. Well, that's what Reinhardt's flagship looks like. That's what the Imperial ships look like. Back then.
so is the story trying to position Julian as being like the last good guy by the end of the series?
Not good
'Cause
guy.
I could tell you downplayed him a lot, or like undercut him a lot, but I couldn't tell if that was because you personally didn't like him, or like
Well, it's obviously
He's
because
not
he
really
personally
important
doesn't
until
like
after Yang dies, but then after that, he's like the Mary Sue democracy character.
okay.
And I
From
did
the-
underplay him a
from
lot
the
because I don't
very-
like him.
From the very little that I've seen of Log, it seems like he's supposed to be an important character.
I
Yeah.
have seen I did watch the episode. You told me to skip ahead from like the first 10 episodes I watched to watch the backstory episode
Yeah.
where Julian is just watching history.
Yeah.
I have seen that.
Oh, so he's the one who watches the history document.
He's literally like
The,
on his
the
way.
History Channel, the Virgin History Channel.
He literally is like on his way from Heineken to Iserlohn to go see Yang. And they just like, he's like,
It's
Yang
like-
likes
like,
history. Maybe
yeah.
I'll watch a history documentary.
He's like, oh shit, I better brush up on my.
If I don't know all about early Earth history, Sentai won't notice me when I go.
Yeah, basically.
That's really interesting. Tell me again about the Trojan Horse. Anyway, what are you gonna talk
Oh, that reminds me. So, do any of the things that like Yang does pass into idiom? Since Earth idioms for a lot of things no longer exist.
They don't really talk about it, but I would absolutely assume that they do.
They talk about Iserlohn as just that fucking thing
The-
you have to keep going back
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
forth
like
over
that they
and over
absolutely
again.
like
Or-
would.
The Chinese
God,
four-character
this is worse than the time that I fought an idol.
It's like
So
the
you're saying we gotta go back
like-
here again?
it's like the Chinese four-character proverb. I kind of imagine.
Yeah,
Like,
the man with the green hat.
yeah.
If you don't know, in Chinese, the idiom for being a cuckold is the man wearing the green hat.
It's now.
Because it's a story of like a woman who would like know that her husband was coming home because he would wear a big green hat, and so she would send off all of her like Mandingo lovers.
Of all the references that have been stated this afternoon that I haven't understood, almost all of them have related to Chinese folklore, which I just don't go fucking anything about.
That's fair.
I actually know more at this point about Japan than I know about China.
Fair.
And I know almost nothing about anything east of Turkey.
Good.
So now this means that you can eat your last brownie and you can have cigarettes.
That sounds good to me.